And you've drawn the Sun card.
Oh, great.
So pessimism, lies, and failures with that one.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, it's upside down.
Okay, that doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, what's the next one?
The Devil. So you're trapped in depression and negative thinking at the moment.
Well, I didn't really need the cards to tell me that. Man, it's also negative. The next one?
Oh, Death.
Oh, for God's sake.
Different card, James. No, Death means you're ending a cycle and moving powerfully into a new one.
That's not what I expected from that one, but okay.
And finally...
Oh my God, it's Wheel of Fortune. Well, that card's worth like 300 US. We're rich.
James, this is the tarot card. We're not rich, but the book says we will be soon, or possibly not that. What?
Well, maybe a psychologist would be more helpful for us right now.
The card said you'd say that.
Really? Where?
They whisper to me at night.
And at that point, Walt got possessed by the tarot deck and murdered James.
Yes.
I'm not James. This is actually someone else.
The tarot deck is also a Ouija board.
Yeah.
It can summon the ancestors of weird thoughts in your brain.
And now we're trapped in
Yeah.
an eternal pit of darkness.
Anyway, welcome.
Somehow still recording this podcast.
Speaking of, welcome to the Get Commander podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast, your favorite source of vitamin B12. I'm your host, Walt.
Wait, Palms Off Gaming are the favourite source, or we're the favourite source of B12?
Look, both are valid choices.
Fair enough. Hello, Commander players. I am the wind beneath your wings, James.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Wow.
You've heard that song by, what's her name? Betty...
Shaggy.
Yeah.
Betty Shaggy.
Wasn't me. And the wind beneath your wings wasn't me.
Wasn't me.
That's a weird mashup.
I don't know anything
You know the
about
song
that.
I'm talking about, though, yeah?
Yeah.
You are the
It
wind
wasn't me.
beneath
by
my
Shaggy.
wings.
Yeah, no, I do know what you're talking
Great
about.
song.
I can. Anyway, before we get to the transmission, we stream live on Twitch.
We sure do. We do it quite frequently, actually, and we've done it so frequently recently.
That we're about to hit affiliate
We're like
on Twitch. In fact, by
Literally
the time,
one stream away. As we were recording this, we're one stream away.
By the time you hear this, we may even be affiliates at that time. I don't want to promise anything.
Go
but
check out Twitch right now. Do we have the blue... Is it a blue tick?
I don't think we get the tick. I think the tick is partner.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how they'd be able to tell. Anyway, if we reach affiliate, there'll be a bunch of cool emotes.
Yeah.
You'll be able to subscribe.
Yeah.
All the cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, twitch.tv/getcommanded. Don't forget to hit follow over there. And we're also, at the time that we go affiliate, we
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
yeah. When we go, yeah.
Threw you so
You
off
did
there.
so much. We'll be announcing a new streaming schedule.
Yeah, well,
a
no.
regular one, not random. Like, hey, we're live. Come join us in an hour. No, like a regular time.
We appreciate all of you that filled out that feedback form that we had a couple of
Yeah.
episodes back, because a few of you said, I'd love to know when you guys are going to stream so we can like get ready for you and be waiting for you in Twitch chat. And we were like, that makes a lot of sense.
And we'd like to know that as well.
So Walt and I have been like calendar bashing, not only with between us, but also our places of employment.
Yes,
with our
rehearsals for my shows,
partners.
performing my shows, yes,
Yeah.
all the things. But we think we've found a regular time that we'll be able to stream for you.
But
So we'll
keep an eye out on socials.
Yeah,
we'll
follow-
put up like a nice big post that says, we're going to do this every insert amount of time here on every insert day time here.
I love how open you've left that. We can
Yeah.
announce anything. We could say once a year
Yeah.
on the 1st of April.
Or once every 30 seconds, you'll see a new commander deck built by Walt.
That's the new content pipeline that we're going to commit
Walt's
to.
going to make 30,000 decks in the next day.
Honestly, it's not much of a growth from where I'm currently at. Anyway, we have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
draw is an essential ingredient in all ideal commander decks. A growing number of cards in your deck must fulfill this requirement.
Strap in. I reckon this one's going to be beefy because I think out of all the deck building principles that we have in our template, we're probably the most passionate about this one, card draw.
I think we said in the deck building template that this makes the single biggest difference to your experience playing a deck besides your land count.
Yes. Yeah, I think
we didn't want to go ahead and be like, you can play a no land deck and have a good time.
You'll be fine.
No,
you can run all the boxes.
We know that matters. But yeah, card draw.
This is something that we've talked about on the pod before. We've talked about it in relation with tutors in card draw versus tutors.
We did.
We've talked about it in relation to the template and how many pieces you should stick in.
Episode 37.
The command there specifically said growing number of cards in your deck, implying that our template is going up.
Yeah,
I guess.
I think honestly the just requirement for card draw in your deck is going up and has been going up for a few years.
The need for it, you mean?
Yeah,
the need.
Yes, the need that exists in the meta at large. Look, I think it's pretty obvious we feel strongly about it. Just in case you're catching up, why does card draw really matter? Card draw is the spells in your deck that keep you casting spells all game.
Yeah,
like,
if you don't have any, you will end up running out of spells in your hand and be in hellbent mode and just be having a generally miserable time and not making any effect on the game.
And we've all been there. Like, most of us, when we start building commander decks, go like, these cards that say draw 2 cards them are so boring. Like, I just want to get to the gas. I want my Krenko Mob Boss. I want my Impact Tremors. I don't want any of this card draw nonsense.
Why would I want to draw cards when I can just play them?
Yeah.
And then you play them and you're like, I ran out.
I run out all the time. It happens
makes a lot of sense.
every 5 turns. I think the other thing I want to highlight is if you're a player who it finds yourself looking at your hand around turn 6 or 7 and there's not really a good thing to do. This can come down to a bunch of things in your deck, but I think a lot of the time the actual culprit of this, the hidden culprit of this, is card draw, because if you had more options in your hand of things to do, you'd probably find a couple of cards in your hand that synergize, or you'd find a card that's a great setup for your next turn. And I think the times where you look at your hand and go, wow, there's just nothing worth doing right now, I think that also comes down to card draw again.
Yeah, I think they're we'll talk about this a bit later, but my choice at the turn 6, 7 point of the game usually will be a deciding point of, can I win right now?
Yeah.
Or should I get more information about my options, which is, by the way, that's card draw.
Yeah.
Getting more information about your options is card draw. Should I get more information and then win in a turn or two? So it's super important, and I think it's made me a better player understanding the nuances of this. Definitely made you a better player, because I remember really early days of Commander with you. It would be hellbent from turn 4 onwards.
Early days. There's a reason the first commander deck I built had the text on it, pay X, draw X cards.
Well, you thought, because back in the day, we also listened to podcasts about how to get better at commander players. And if you've not heard this story, it's great.
It's on the TikTok, if you've seen it over there.
Walt used to think that the Command Zone, one of the holy grails of commander podcasts, thought that 10 pieces of card draw and 10 pieces of ramp meant you needed 5 of each.
Look, don't throw me under the bus like that. I just remembered the numbers wrong. It wasn't I was heard 10 and was yes, all together.
5 plus 5.
I just was literally I remembered 5 board wipes, and I was it's just 5 of everything.
5 of everything. 5 lands, 5 commanders.
5 artifacts, 5 enchantments. Man, it's no cards left.
Deck building is really easy.
Yeah. Also, everyone's playing 100 cards in their deck like chumps. Look at me with my 40 card deck. Bunch of morons out here.
They forgot that 5 of everything means you need 5 empty sleeves.
Yeah. 5 fingers on both hands.
You've gotten a lot better at this.
I have gotten a lot better. And it's resulted in me having a lot more fun playing Commander. And we'll go into some of the ramifications of all of that in a sec.
Should we outline our guide first?
We should.
Because we've talked about the number 10 before.
We have.
But
it's always had a plus next to it,
we've
right?
always put that plus symbol afterwards.
And I think even the last time we mentioned it, which was it feels like just the other day, but episode 37 was our Commander deck building template, like the
That's a
template
year
we
ago.
use for building our decks. I know.
That's a year ago.
Crazy. About a year it's been. But we said, even then, when we mentioned it, we were like, we're leaning higher than 10. There's a reason that plus is there, and the plus is there because on average we're closer to 15, probably these
I remember
days.
we actually had a debate between us of whether or not we should say 10 plus or 15.
Yeah, because
a conversation.
we were looking at our decks and going like, I don't know how often we're even playing 10. I think that I like 10 plus because there's times where you can play 10, and we were going to the times that you can play 10.
I'm thinking of a couple of decks in mind specifically.
Yeah, definitely. But look, I guess we should also just outline what we mean when we say card draw. I'm going to use the definition we used for episode 37 because I think it still works. It's very like more words than you'd expect, but it just gives you more options for defining things as a card draw. So what we said was, in general, card draw should be ways to give you access to more cards than you otherwise would. And so by otherwise would here, I mean like not just the drawing one card off the top every turn.
Yep.
It's like, no, I want access to more cards than this. The reason it doesn't just say cards that say draw a card on them is because there are going to be effects that we'll outline, especially towards the end of this episode, like exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn.
Yep.
They don't draw cards. They don't put them in your hand. But in terms of what they're giving you access to, it's more cards, so we call it card draw.
And what I was saying before is like, what are your options to do right now?
Yes.
If you have cards in exile or cards in your bin that you can play with, cast or play from the graveyard, do whatever, like, flick them around, do stuff with them. That means you've got access to them. It means you've got options, and that is what we refer to as card draw.
Yeah, think of it as like the thing that's increasing the number of cards in your huge hand that includes, the exile. And
top of library.
Top of library, sometimes the graveyard. Like, how many cards do you have access to right now? And if you can have a way to make that number greater, that's what we would call card draw.
A lot of other content creators, and us included, will also refer to some of these things as card advantage or card selection.
I know you tag your decks like this, don't you?
I do, yeah. If you go onto my Moxfield list, I have two separate tags for card draw and card advantage, mainly because I don't trust myself as a deck builder and might accidentally only include card advantage, whereas I definitely want to include card draw in my deck, which, like we said, gives me access to more cards than I would. But there are other cards that I really like, for example, Sensei's Divining Top. I really like that card, and I like having access to selecting what card I'll draw before I draw it.
Well, and that can still affect your destiny, right? Like, it can still affect what your next few turns look like and the cards that you will draw. Like, that's still a totally valid thing that we will talk more about towards the end of the episode, because it does make a big difference. But yes, it's not strictly card draw. So I see the appeal of tagging differently. I personally tag everything under card draw. So if you look on one of my Moxfield lists, it just says card draw, and you'll see like cards that say scry on them, and go like, well, that's not card draw, because I'm counting them as like half of a card.
Yeah, believe it or not, Walt and I are different people. It's wild.
Little known fact about Get Commanded.
Speaking of which, by the way, when I noticed that we pulled up this command, it had already been read, and I'm just looking in front of us right now, and there are an incredible amount of statistics sitting in front of me that I had nothing to do with.
Some nerd, James. Some sweaty, greasy nerd.
Spike.
Yep. Man, still hate that. Some Spike, some big, greasy, stinky Spike with long hair parted in the middle. It's me.
In a purple hoodie.
Well, right now. Compiled some stats. Look, I opened the command in advance. I know it's a bit of a faux pas, but I wanted to prepare.
Some of these commands are complicated. We need to prepare for them. It makes sense.
We want to do the best job we can, and I think the stats are interesting. And look, when we asked you all recently about it, you also said mostly that you like the stats.
Yeah.
So most of you are going to be happy about this.
So strap in for another Walt Does Stats episode.
So I just looked at card draw specifically. So basically I pulled up every one of our decks that currently exists on Moxfield. I know that some of yours are a bit out of date. You're not a psychopath like I am, who like takes a card out of my deck, like at the game store, opens Moxfield on my phone, sets the printing to the correct one, adds it to my Moxfield collection so that I know that it's in there. No.
Walt actually starts ripping his hair out if he can't do it. If he has a card that's like in a sleeve in a deck box that's not on Moxfield, you think his hair is like as thick and lush as it is? No, it's a wig. It's a wig. He's
extraordinary wig seamstress.
Yeah.
I collect hairs from a multitude of places and sew them into wigs.
Ethically sourced, of course.
Will you wear wigs?
Will you wear wigs? God, that's a deep cut. We've got a
love
lot of
that
stats to talk
Yes,
about. Let's keep going.
Okay, so the decks that you had, that some of them are maybe a little bit out of date. That's okay. They were
Yeah.
close enough that I thought that they would work for the purpose of collecting stats.
Specifically, card draw as a tag. I think I don't edit.
Yes.
I've not edited a lot of that since
No,
making.
you know
them,
what
so,
you're doing.
Yeah.
I will note that there's one of your decks that is still inexplicably not on Moxfield, which is your Zaxara, the exemplary deck.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I don't know.
I built it years ago, and it was
existed
before
for
I
so
used
long.
as
Yeah.
Moxfield, and I just
I don't know.
not put it.
Maybe it was
there.
like in a different box when you were like, because you did like a big day where you did a bunch of your decks.
I'm
Anyway,
also incredibly lazy, which is another big influence of
look,
that.
you're a busy boy. I
Yeah.
don't blame you. But yes, so pretty much every casual deck that the two of us is currently playing with, I use for the purposes of this.
So it's a relatively small sample size, but we've got a lot of decks.
Yes. So I will say that the decks as they exist now, mostly. So there's some stats that I pulled here that I refer to the historical fact that these decks were built a long time ago. Even though they've been updated, I still think there's relevant decisions we made when we built the deck that
have influenced how they've been tinkered with.
Yes,
Yeah, I get you.
Exactly.
Sure.
We had none of these are decks we've like pulled apart and completely rebuilt again.
Yeah.
We've mostly substituted a few cards, right?
Yeah, sure.
So here's the stats that I looked at. Obviously, I looked at the number of card draw tagged cards in each of the decks. For the purposes of this, I included your card advantage ones,
Yeah.
so that our numbers would be the
Line
same
up.
representation. Yeah. How many tags cards were tagged as card draw? I looked at how many of those cards were true card draw, so I did track that. It didn't end up being relevant, so you can disregard that one. I noted when the deck was built. So
interesting.
For us, it's between 2020 and 2024. All of our
Yep.
decks were built in that time frame. Who built it? Obviously, it's going to be relevant to know whether
Fair
I built
enough.
the deck or whether you did. And then for extra fun, I thought this would be really interesting. You'll remember this. I messaged you, and I did this myself.
You totally did.
And I asked you to subjectively tell me, out of 10, how well you felt each of your decks maintained a good number of cards in hand.
I was a
i.e.
pretty harsh critic on my decks as well. I analyzed them pretty hardly.
It's interesting, you didn't go below 5, so you did the classic commander power level mistake of like no deck is lower than a 5. It's
true.
But yes, you were very honest, which I appreciated a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was really brutally honest. Like the decks that I was like, no, I've ended up in top deck mode a lot here.
Yeah.
You go down here.
I was the same. I had decks that I tagged as a 2 for reference.
Whoa,
like a
okay.
2 or a 3 where I was
So
like,
our scales might be a little bit different.
they
but-
might be, but I did some funky stuff to make them work. I wanted to go into it. It's boring and
Data
stats.
magic.
I did data magic so that the things would look the right way.
Patrons, if you'd like access to the
Oh,
spreadsheet,
yeah.
we might chuck it up on Patreon.
Yeah, I'll
this
chuck-
is another thing that might be fun.
Yeah, I'll chuck some graphs up on Patreon.
I
for
know
sure.
Fletcher is a massive nerd as well. So
Yes, he'll
jump
probably.
in.
If I haven't posted up on Patreon, Fletcher will have messaged me probably even by the time you've heard this and asked me to post it up. So
Probably.
yeah, Fletcher, it's incoming. So those were the stats I looked at. So just to reiterate again, number of cards that were card draw. How many of those cards were true card draw? Again, we can disregard that. When the deck was built, who built it, whether it was me or you, and how we subjectively felt each deck maintained a good number of cards. in its
Out
hand.
of 10 ranking.
Out of 10, roughly.
Sure.
Roughly.
All right, should we have a look at it over time
So
firstly?
I pulled a bunch of stats, and yes, over
Sure.
time was really, really interesting. So I looked at, on average, our decks all combined into one. So I didn't compare the two of us in this particular case. How many pieces of card draw, on average, did we play in a deck that was built in 2020 versus a deck that was built in 2024?
Go on.
Unsurprising, 2020 we had an average of 11.
Okay, so we were actually following the templates.
Roughly the
Yeah,
number.
That's
Yep.
good, yeah.
This was including some of those pieces that might not necessarily be card draw, though. So maybe erring a bit low.
Yep.
2024, we have averaged 17.67.
Whoa, that's a significant increase.
A big, big increase.
There's like individual cards in our decks.
Yeah, that have been tagged as
Whoa.
card draw in our decks. We are now averaging, for the decks that were built in 2024, so for me, I think it's Gandalf and it's my Goblin deck. For you, it's just Ninth Doctor so
far that I've built this year.
Just from 2024. But from those three decks,
Bloody hell.
we are averaging 17.67, closer to 18. 18 cards.
That is bonkers, but
Yeah.
also I kind of expected the increase.
I did too.
I knew that. I mean, like, look, the Space Commanders even said that they knew that it was a growing requirement in our decks to up the number
They
of pieces of
specifically
card
said
draw.
it. They know.
Yeah, so I was kind of like erring on the side of, oh, well, they've probably been watching us for a while, but it's good to know, like, literally from the data that we have, we have just naturally started to be playing more card draw.
And if anything, by the way, the number might be even more of a discrepancy than this, because keep in mind, this is the deck as it exists today. So it's possible that since 2020, we've added more card draw to those decks. So if anything, the average in 2020 might have been 8 or 7 or something crazy.
And keeping in mind as well, like, you know, we also will probably play the ones we built really long ago, like in 2020 less. So we've probably edited them less as well.
I
which
would say
also
so, yeah.
Kind
So
of
look,
balances out those biases and stuff.
It does a bit. But still, even with all that aside,
That's
11
amazing.
to 7 to 18 is a huge jump.
Yeah, that's huge.
The interesting thing that goes alongside this is I have the graphs in front of us. We'll just describe them to you. It's pretty obvious, just like linear progression.
Yeah.
I charted the subjective experience of our decks, again, how well we felt they maintained cards in hand relative to when they were built. So just based literally decks over time, how do we feel about the card draw in them? Both of us have two pretty hefty outliers.
Yeah.
I have a wheel deck that was the first deck I ever built, so it's a big spike at the front.
The whole point of the deck is to draw cards.
Yep. You have your Yuriko deck, which literally puts cards in your hand. So
very consistently.
Makes sense that that's very high in your subjective experience. But everything else, if you sort of eliminate those outliers, there is a clear linear graph
really
going
is.
up.
There really is.
That literally says the decks we built more recently, we feel are better. Again, we didn't know the numbers at the time.
Yeah.
We just were subjectively asked to this. We felt that the decks we built more recently, on average, are keeping cards in hand, maintaining cards in hand, drawing cards much better than the ones we built a long time ago.
I mean, looking at my graph, I'd say that, like, my linear progression is probably like a 30% degree angle.
Yours
like,
is much clearer of a definition than mine, for sure.
Yeah, I would say that mine is like definitely like James. You are really prioritizing card draw slots in your deck.
It's been a very steady increase over time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Savine's a spike. That put a lot of card draw in my
Yeah,
deck.
that card I never see struggle to do anything.
No.
To be fair.
It was a bit of a passion project, to be fair. I put a lot of love and care into that deck.
It got a 10 for reference on the subjectivity scale, so that's why it looks so high.
It bloody earned that 10.
Yeah. Look, mine spikes a little bit more all over the place. I think I build more wild out there decks.
You've also just built more decks than I have.
I have. So at the moment, you only have, I think, 8 casual commander decks
Currently,
that are functional.
9, I think.
9 maybe? Yeah. Oh, that's right. I missed one, I think. Oh, Zaxara's not counted.
not on the deck.
There are 8 on the graph. Yeah. But I have 15. So, yeah, there's a bit more data there. But
I don't know
even
how you
so,
find time to play them all.
if you drew that hefty trend line, it
for
would
sure.
still be going upwards, right? So I think the main lesson I want to highlight here is just that card draw really matters, and it matters more today than it did before.
And I guess that there's another thing that I want to point out here as well, is that Walt and I believe, we hope, that we as players have gotten better over time. Not as like specifically regarding card draw, but just overall. We've gotten better at deck building, better at piloting.
Yep.
We're winning more often in like pods. We're not like playing just against ourselves anymore. But like that means that as we've become better players, we can see a linear progression, a positive correlation between how much card draw we're including in our deck and the fact that we're getting better as commander players.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very disheartening, like, for the purpose of this episode, if the graph went down.
Yeah, that would actively be proving our point wrong.
Yeah, I mean, for the purposes of data and being, like, true, we would have to tell you card draw is worse today than it ever was, right? Like, as we've become better players, because that's sort of inevitable after 4 years of playing commander, the card draw's gone down. We have to tell you, card draw sucks. Don't do it.
But
the reality is that's not what's happened at all.
The complete opposite. As we've grown in our experience with Commander, and like, you know, we're now 85 episodes into this podcast. We've put a lot into this. So like we are dedicated Commander players, and we are seeing that we want to put more card draw in our decks, and we rate the decks. I'm even looking at the specific decks that I looked at and rated higher. Like Savine, I rated a 10.
Yeah.
I think that's probably my best deck at the moment.
Yeah.
My best casual deck. My strongest and most consistent, the one I'm winning the most with.
Yep, the one that draws the most cards. I mean, the deck of mine that I've built most recently that I'm having the far and away the most fun with is my...
Saga?
No, I was Gandalf the White.
Oh, Gandalf the White.
Actually,
yeah,
I've had
brand
an
new,
absolute blast with, weirdly, a white deck. But that's a big spike on my scale. If you look at mine, I rated that one as an 8.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I've had an absolute blast playing that deck. And I think you can't discount how important it is that the deck, you feel like you always have something to do. It's just like a massive thing with decks that you have fun with, are the decks where you go, look at your hand and go like, man, I could do this, I could remove that might trigger this thing. Like the decks where you get to look at your hand and feel that thrill, those are the decks you have fun with, and those are the decks with card drawing.
And also, like, I'll also point out another relationship. The decks that I'm winning with, for example, right, include Savine. I love playing that deck. I have a good time with that deck.
Yeah.
Card draw that I rated lower, I've got like Scarab God on the lower scale. I've even got Ayula on the lower scale. I lose a lot with those decks.
Yeah.
I have a less fun time with those decks. I can see another positive correlation between this data. I have more fun when I've got more card draw in my deck.
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing. And I think the next thing that I wanted to go into is actually is interesting as well. I think, again, we've had a similar trajectory overall in terms of the subjectivity thing.
How we feel about our decks performing.
Yeah, and in terms of the number of card draw. Those things were very clear between the two of us. But they're not the same.
Sure. How do we differ?
I compared, again, I tracked the builder of each of these decks, right? For 2020 and 2021, the average number of card draw that we were playing in our decks was very similar. We tracked in that steady upwards way.
Yep.
Weirdly, for 2022, I couldn't work out why.
There is a bit of a dip there.
We
Why is there
both dipped down. I can't work out if it's a feature of the kind of decks we were building at that time or what it is. I'd have to look more into that for whatever reason.
Both of us dipped.
We did.
Weird.
I don't know what it is about that. But then in 2023 and 2024, we both went back to that clear linear upwards progression again. However, James is looking at the chart and he can see it already.
My eyes are gone wide because I just realized what color I am.
Yep, James's blue line here goes up a lot faster than mine does and has stayed that way for 2024 as well. So for reference, in 2024's decks, admittedly, again, there's only 1 for James and 2 for me. So take this all with a grain of salt. But still, I'm averaging about 17 cards in my 2024 decks. Bits of card draw, I mean. James is averaging 20.
So I'm like really pushing our average up.
You really are. You're pulling it up.
Yeah.
Big time.
That's interesting. I think that does look a little bit like I would expect that just in our play styles and all this kind of stuff. But you're still got a positive trajectory. It's just not as steep as mine.
Yeah. I think that both of us, as we've improved as players, as you said before, have prioritized card draw more, and that is like a clear progression.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's a clear discrepancy here in terms of just like play styles, where I do think you prioritize drawing cards a little bit more. I was sat there and I was trying to think about it, and one of the things that immediately came to mind is I think you are someone who is more likely to sandbag.
Oh, yeah. God, yeah.
Like, if you see, like,
I'll
might
admit that.
win...
You sounded like that as, like, a negative thing. I'm like, no. I'll wait.
It's a great thing. I think you know when to go for your win. And I've said this before on the podcast. This is one of your strongest traits as a player.
Stop it.
No, really. You're very, very good at it. And especially in CDH, it becomes especially prevalent, like most things do when you play competitively. But, yeah, I think you're the kind of player who will opt to refrain from dropping a huge bomb, if you can, until the next turn when you think people might have use some more resources, or you'll get more resources of your own by drawing a bunch of cards in that turn.
Yeah, I think, look, as a comparison, when we're playing with other people, and like you can see this on our Twitch stream, if you watch us at twitch.tv/getcommanded, you will see Walt point out that I'm a bigger threat than I appear to be because I've just drawn a bunch of cards. It's a really common thing in our games where I will specifically put more effort into getting the most information that I possibly can and then deploying a win. Whereas you're more likely to cast a single big card draw spell later and win the next turn round, where I'll kind of like sit on it for 2, 3, maybe 4 turns. You'll probably go sorcery speed creature, sorcery speed spell, enchantment. All right, no cards in hand, draw. cast a Mind Spring for X equals 7.
Yeah.
Draw 7 new cards.
Yeah.
And then people will be like, whoa, Walt just refreshed his hand. Get
Yeah.
him. And you're like, James has been doing this for 3 turns.
Again, like speaking of those relationships over 4 years, I have a relationship with James.
Yes.
And that relationship involves a lot of losing. And so
Hang on, we've got data on that.
you do win more often than I do.
Only by a
It's only
bit.
by a bit. But I would say in the early days, you won a lot more than I did.
Yeah, okay,
I
fair
think
enough.
you were already a better player. To be fair, you'd played a lot of standard, you played a lot of limited. I was coming from long years of playing at a kitchen table and not knowing the rules.
Yeah. You didn't know
And
what a
playing-
Planeswalker was when we started playing.
No,
together,
I mean,
that's true.
Planeswalkers didn't exist when I started playing, to be fair. But yeah, like, I think that over time, like, you mentioned I point out, like, oh, James has, like, 8 cards in hand. Maybe that's a problem. It's because I lost to James with 8 cards in hand so many times.
It's like, you get those, like, warning lights, and there's different warning lights. Like, it's kind of like, we have these, like, preconceptions about dangerous places. Like, if you look at a dark alleyway, you go, don't want to walk down there.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
spooky place.
Big time.
Walt's dark alleyway is me with a full grip of cards.
It's that smile, that goddamn smile. I do agree with the other thing that you said, though, which is that I think I'm more likely to cast one big card draw spell.
Yeah, I think you do a thing, and I've noted this before with you specifically. I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast before.
Yeah.
But you'll try and win on your curve trajectory. So you'll try and deploy win cons at the mana slot that you believe they should be going at.
Yeah.
Right? So like by turn 8, 9, you'll be like, right, here's my time to win.
Yeah.
If you can see on the board state that it's not going to win you the game, you will instead replace that splashy spell with a splashy piece of card draw to keep you in the game for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
That's your way of playing card draw.
I think you're right. And it's funny, like, thinking about it, they do sound a little bit similar between the two of us, where we're choosing not to win and instead draw cards. But I think I'm doing it later in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that the spells I'm doing it with generally are probably putting more cards available to me. Like,
In one go.
Yeah. I
Like
think-
one spell will put
Yeah.
6 cards in your hand.
I think you're the kind of player who gets to, turn 6 or 7 and draws 4 cards and goes, okay, I'm pretty set for next turn.
or
and
2 cards even, just like a little refresh.
I think a lot of the time, if I imagine my typical win in a game, I think it's that I get to turn 8 or 9, draw like 10 cards, pitch down to hand size, and have like 2 mana up with a great answer.
Heroic intervention. Or something like that.
Something like heroic intervention, so that no matter what happens, I'm getting to my next turn.
Your board state that's advantageous will be able to have a win con deployed and win from there. So like you've got a bunch of tokens, you've got the Cradle Hoof in hand, you've got the protection spell for the turn cycle. Now that you've drawn them all those cards, you'll sit on it and then go for it next turn.
Yep, and if I can successfully stave off the attempts to stop me, like a board wipe or something like that, and then the next turn, then I'm like, okay, here's my actual win con.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I think it's later in the game. In general, I think you're drawing cards earlier, and I think that means maybe you're playing slightly more card draw spells, just on average.
Probably more card draw spells. This would be another interesting thing to look at, of the mana value of our card draw spells.
Oh, I didn't track that, but that's true.
Yeah, I reckon, I'm just assuming because we've not got the data here to back us up. I think my average card draw spell is less CMC than yours.
I think I would agree.
I reckon I'm doing more little stuff than you are.
Yeah, I think you also, and I think I will go into this a little bit later, but I think you're more likely to deploy pieces that will incrementally draw you cards over time. Whereas, I'm a big like Return of the Wild speaker kind of player.
Big boom.
Yeah,
there we go.
I'm
I'm going to
like,
draw 10 cards.
Now that I'm ready, I'm going to draw 15. Yeah, I'm going to draw 10 or something.
And look, I think there's pros and cons to each of these.
Yeah.
Because like I think that the lesson from this piece of data is really that like it's really personal of how much card draw and what kind of card draw you include.
Yes.
Because your play style will influence how that card draw works in practice. Because like on paper, a Return of the Wild speaker is a really good card. But like if I'm a player that likes to use a bunch of mana on lots of different spells, dumping, what's Return of the Wild speaker? 5 CMC?
Yeah, 5.
I don't want to be pumping 5 CMC into drawing cards.
Yeah.
I'd rather put 3 CMC into drawing less cards and have 2 more mana available to do something else.
Yeah, and hold up an answer. This is the other
Hold
thing.
up an answer,
You're
yeah.
a real instant speed player, and so I think that lower card draw slot means you can leave 2 mana up or leave 1 mana up sometimes.
Oh my god, well, did we just prove on the podcast that we're different people? I love this episode. This is great.
I agree with what the takeaway that you had here, though, which is that the number that is ideal for you is probably different to someone else, potentially. However, don't go under 10.
Yeah,
please,
no.
please. And again, also don't ignore that first stat we looked at, which is that over time, we have been creeping up. And honestly, I think the next time we give a deck building bit of advice...
I think we'll say 15.
I think we'll just say 15. I think
15.
it's just honestly where you should aim for these days. And increasingly, the decks that I'm playing that I'm, not having a good time with are those decks that are closer to 10.
Yeah. Look, I'm pretty happy that we've landed where we were originally giving advice anyway, which is do not go below 10 because if you think about the statistics of drawing card draw, if you go below 10, you are now less than 10% chance of drawing a piece of card draw in every 10th of your deck.
Yeah.
That's way too low. Way too low.
We talk about enhancers a lot and how stuff like Panharmonicon and how when you draw it off the top, it doesn't do anything. The great thing about card draw is you can be hellbent, but if you draw your bit of card draw...
You're not hellbent anymore,
No, you're
cowboy.
not hellbent anymore. That card represents 4 cards deep or 5, 10 cards deep on your deck. That is it cannot be overstated how important it is.
And that's the end of the episode.
There's more to come like that. So the next thing I looked at that I thought would be interesting was the relationship between our perception of how well the decks drew cards, which we've talked about a couple of times already, and the actual number in the deck of pieces of card draw.
Interesting. So to translate this, it's the relationship between how we feel piloting the deck and whether or not the deck is drawing enough cards and how many cards we tagged as card draw in the deck.
Exactly right.
Do they relate?
They do, but not that much, which I think is really interesting. There's a couple of very clear outliers, which we're going to go into in more detail later. We've actually talked about one already in this episode.
Okay, these graphs do have a linear relationship.
There's a linear one, but they jump all over the place.
It's a lot spikier than our last graph.
So basically, I tracked this one where I just had the subjective rating move down in a steady line across the chart. So you can see the orange line here. James can see it, but you guys can't. But literally, it's just going from the most to the least rated card draw for our deck. So, for instance,
if I rated a 10,
it
starts with Savine, and then it goes, what was my lowest?
Ayula. Yeah, Ayula, Queen Among Bears. So the progression just goes directly like that on that line. But then next to it, we have this blue line that's jumping all over the place. That is how many actually bits of card draw are in there. So first off, I wanted to highlight the the one that jumps below the orange line completely. It's a massive, massive outlier.
Is that my Yuriko deck?
It's Yuriko again. So again, we'll go into it some more later, but this is a particular sort of commander that is the reason it's jumping down like that. Because this is a deck that you rated really highly that has very little actual card draw in there.
So this is an inverse relationship. I said that was going to be... I think it's great at drawing cards.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually have a lot of cards tagged on Mox Field as card draw.
Yes.
But genuinely, this card puts so many cards into my hand.
That's the whole story.
Yeah.
We'll go into more detail later, but that's literally the whole thing. But yeah, in general, there's a very steady, slow progression. The trend line is in there. It does go down, but not very steeply. So
yeah, the whole point is there is a positive relationship between how we feel about our decks and how drawing cards.
Yes.
And how many tagged card draw pieces are in the deck.
But it's not a strong relationship.
But it's not strong.
And the line does jump all over the place. So for instance, we're looking at mine now. I have another big example, which is Barbala Saga. Those of you who are thinking ahead of this probably already can see the relationship between Barbala Saga and Yuriko in terms of what the commanders do. But yeah, the other decks that are on this trend line are jumping all over the place, where some decks that have a load of card draw are considered quite bad at drawing cards to me, and some decks that have not very much card draw at all are considered quite good. So to be honest, I think the only lesson I wanted to highlight here...
Can we look at these outliers?
I mean, we can in a sec, but the only the lesson I just wanted to take away here was just the numbers aren't everything. Basically.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
We'll go into it in more detail later, but yeah, the number of card draw pieces that you have is not the entire story of how well it draws cards.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more going into how many cards are being put into your hand and how much advantage you're getting.
Yes.
Than just the number of tagged pieces. There's quality. There's also something, but. I really want to talk about these outliers.
Yeah, let's talk about these outliers.
Because the two that were specifically within both of our decks was my Yuriko deck and your Barbala Saga deck.
Yes. So I wanted to add 2 more to these kind of outlier sort of things here, which is that the 4 decks with the lowest number of actual card draw pieces in them were Barbala Saga, Yuriko, Scarab God,
Interesting.
and Sir Gwyn, Hero of Ashvale.
Okay.
Now, the
Two of mine, two of yours. That's pretty
two
good.
of mine, two of yours. The thing that all these commanders have in common, kind of, if you count Scarab God, all these commanders draw cards.
Yeah, or in the case of Scarab God, give you access to cards you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah,
Scarab God gives you
scry
access. Yeah.
a bunch in the upkeep with Scarab God, but also, you have the ability to recur things from your graveyard. So your graveyard is kind of an extended hand in a Scarab God deck. It makes sense that you don't need that much card draw in there.
And also, your Babala Saga deck literally says draw 3 cards on it.
Yeah. And
like over and over and over again.
That's the whole deck. Sir Gwyn is the commander that says whenever an equipped creature you control attacks, draw a card and lose a life. Like, that literally says card draw on there. So, I think that there's a clear relationship here where we know what we're doing, clearly, when we're building decks and going, okay, my commander has the ability to draw so many cards just in my command zone. I always have access to it. It's going to happen in every game.
So, naturally,
I don't need that many other bits of card draw in the deck when my commander is going to do it every turn.
that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Because, Yuriko, I genuinely think there are like 4 tagged pieces of card draw in the entire
I think it was
deck.
5.
5. That
But
makes sense.
Very low,
But
obviously.
like Yuriko says, every time a ninja deals damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hands. Not necessarily drawing a card, but it's giving you that extra card, and that's like happening twice, 3 times a turn if I'm playing Yuriko really well.
And as early as turn 2, right?
Oh, it's
play
good.
Play an unblockable creature on turn 1.
Ninjutsu
or
in
any
Yuriko.
creature, really, if you can just get it through somewhere. Turn 2, Ninjutsu, Yuriko, draw a card off the top.
Amazing.
Next turn, if you can do it again, like deploy another unblockable creature, draw 2 more cards. 3. Like, it's putting cards in your hand every turn.
Exponential
if you got
growth.
Yuriko right. Yeah.
I think what did I rate Yuriko? Like an 8? And
Yuriko was rated very high.
Yeah.
That was I think it was the second highest deck that you rated.
Yeah,
was
that makes
Yuriko.
sense.
And it was that huge spike that went under the line, under the orange line. And it's because, you had 6 bits of card draw in there, but it draws cards really well. And similarly, my Sir Gwyn deck probably needs some help on this because it does draw cards, but only once you play your 6 mana commander. I think this deck needs a bit of work still, specifically because of that problem, because you need to get Sir Gwyn out before anything starts to happen,
That's
really. But the lesson I wanted to highlight here was just that your deck's strategy, and especially your commander, will affect the number that is ideal for that deck, and so you should adjust the number of card draw pieces accordingly.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep. I wanted to talk about the other end of the spectrum, the decks that we had that had a very large number of card draw cards tagged.
Like, pieces that we've tagged in the deck as card draw.
Close, like more like that 20 mark, not so much like 8 or 9.
There's a lot more in this list.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about more of them. So, you only have 2 decks in here. You've got your 9th Doctor and K9 deck.
Yep.
And you have your Savine deck. And I have my Kaza Wizards deck, my Gandalf the White deck, my Azor the Lawbringer deck, and my Humans, Catilda and Lear deck in here.
That's fair.
So, one I think we can eliminate immediately here is my Azor the Lawbringer deck. That's a wheels deck.
It's the whole point of the deck is to draw cards.
Yeah, it makes sense. You'd be very silly to not have a bunch of card draw in that deck.
Wow, I'm going to play Chasm Skulker and not draw any cards.
It would be a bad deck, pretty much.
You suck at deck building.
But the thing that the other 5 have in common, this is the closest relationship I could draw, but I think it's there, is that I think the quality of each card draw piece that was tagged in there was on average a bit lower.
Sure, I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, so when I say quality, I mean, like, for instance, my Kaza Wizards deck, like, some of the things that were tagged here were wizards that, like, ETB and Scry 2.
So when you Google, like, just go into Google, best blue cards that draw cards.
Yeah.
Rhystic Study is going to come up. Mindspring might come up. These like really good, efficient cards that we all know draw a lot of cards. Guarantee you, a wizard that ETBs and scries you 2 cards.
What do you mean?
That's not good card draw.
You don't look at your top 10 best card draw pieces in blue and see Fairy Seer?
Silly.
What are you talking about?
You're ignoring a staple in Commander.
Of the format.
Yeah.
Staple, I mean, it's a great card. But yes, it's just Scries 2. It's not drawing you any cards into your hand. It's only going 2 cards deep. It's not a very good card draw piece, but it's tagged in the deck, so that's going to bring the number up the more of those that are
Interesting.
in there.
Yeah,
So,
like my 9th Doctor deck, for example, has like the Thassa that scries in your upkeep.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm having multiple upkeeps, that's good card advantage.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's getting me a lot of advantage, and I'm seeing a lot of cards before I draw it.
And it's good in the deck.
It's good in the deck. It's an upkeep trigger. But again, it like in any other deck, that card, like Thassa, would just be a bit meh.
And it's not putting any extra cards in your hand. And look, even like there are cards in your Ninth Doctor deck that say at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card on them. Like there's the Commander's Awakening.
Commander's Awakening. There's also Inspiring Refrain is the suspend spell that draws you 2 cards and resuspends itself. That's pretty good.
It does, but like these are card draw pieces that are only drawing you more than 1 card a turn if your deck is already working, right? Like if your Ninth Doctor is untapping, yes, you'll draw extra cards.
The synergy needs to be happening.
It does, but like the flat, like what do we call it? The floor of each of those cards is just draw an extra card in your upkeep, which can be good, but in general is kind of so-so, right?
For an example, it's Inspiring Refrain. Is suspend for 3. For 3 mana.
So 2 and a blue, suspend it.
Every 3 turns, I'll be drawing 2 cards. But with my Ninth Doctor on field, it's every 1.5 turns?
Yes.
Every 1.5 turns I'll be drawing a card. So naturally, drawing 2 cards? That's way better. That's immediately so good. The floor of Inspiring Refrain's pretty shit.
It's lower than Commander's Awakening or one of those draw a card in your upkeep, right? It's because it's draw 2 cards every 3 turns. That's lower than even drawing 1 card every turn.
I'm now seeing why this deck doesn't win enough.
No! I think these card draw pieces are really good in the deck. I don't want to besmirch them. I just want to be like...
The quality of them overall is a lot lower because the hoops that we're jumping through are more and a little bit more tricky. But the synergy, I mean, like your Gandalf deck, for example, it's running a bunch of like artifacts that ETB and draw a card because your commander will double it. That's like, it's great synergy. And oh my God, when your deck gets going, I've never seen a mono white deck, by the way, draw as many cards as your Gandalf deck.
It's kind of silly. But like, to be fair, I think there are like 21 cards that are tagged as card draw in this deck. And most of them are just artifacts that ETB and draw a card. And it's just so that once Gandalf is out, it's, Ica Wellspring, draw 2.
That's pretty good.
It's Crack My Chromatic Star, draw 2.
So strong.
It's really, really good in the deck. But again, like the flaw is, okay, Gandalf's not out. Pay 1 for Chromatic Star. Pay 1 Crack Chromatic Star. Draw 1 card. I paid 2 mana to draw 1 card, and I've sacked it. Like it's gone.
That's bad.
It's not so good.
I mean, like Savine again. Like it's all of these like really cute little like Faithless Looting, for example. Faithless Looting is 1 red, discard or draw 2, discard 2. But I can flash it back. So the advantage that I get when Savine copies it when I flash it back is nuts. I see 4 cards. That's awesome.
And also like in your deck, the cards being put into your graveyard
is even more advantage.
You can put more things with flashback into the graveyard. That's giving you access to more spells. It's a great card in the deck. But it's not on its face putting cards into your hand. Really, it's putting cards into your hand and then getting rid of them again.
I think the way you can look at this is if your commander was the Prismatic Piper, if your commander did nothing,
choose a color,
and you were just like playing these cards on face value, the quality is immediately lower.
Yes.
I see what you're saying.
And so it makes sense then. Like we're again, it's to our own horn again, but we are clever enough people to recognize, okay, I will need more pieces of card draw if the card draw in the deck is doing this much less on average.
Okay, I'm feeling really good about how we are as Commander players because we've got data to back us up that we're doing okay.
Exactly. So basically the lesson I just want to highlight here is that the quality of the card draw pieces you include also matters a lot. And you will need more card draw if the card draw quality in your deck is poor. How do you evaluate card draw quality in your deck? Well, that will be the subject of the second half of this broadcast.
Wow.
But before that, we're going to take a thrifty interlude.
This thrifty interlude's kind of like when Avengers Endgame was coming out and you just had to like sit on the edge of your seat, but like, there's unanswered questions about card draw that I have. I want to know about the other stuff. This is less thrifty, more like I'm willing to spend at least $10 for a movie ticket to see Endgame.
Can you tell that James doesn't script these before we do?
I don't think they can.
I love them.
I don't think they can tell.
I love them, honestly.
I
fully love them so much. I can see the panic in your eyes every time I say thrifty interludes. He goes, fuck, I have to fucking think of one.
I love the fact that so for reference, this is so off topic. We have like a template that we use for our episodes. Obviously, we have the interlude in the middle. We have like little, dot points of reminding us what to say at what points. I don't include any of that
No,
shit.
it's
and
just
it's just
blank.
become a bit that's continuing
There's
on.
not even a blank space that says like James Phil. Like he doesn't
No.
get a reminder. I just say Thrifty Interlude and look at him,
and then
he
I
knows
freak the fuck out.
it's time to say Avengers Endgame or something like that. Again, fully, I love them so much. I fully love them so much. Anyway, we've got
Thrifty Interlude
so
time.
much more to talk about, including all the different types of card draw and what we think of them. We're going to evaluate the card draw. But before that,
I can't believe we've not done that already. But
I
go
know,
on.
right? We're going to hear a little something about a thrifty card. And as is tradition, I'll be performing a monologue. And this week, it is the Cowled Merchant with some new wares. He's
back.
Do you want to feature the feature? Do you
Feature?
Want
I can feature the speak of the card that we're thinking this week.
It's exactly what I was thinking.
Nailed it.
Perfect.
All right, this week's Thrifty Interlude card is Siphon Mind. For 3 and a blue, you'll get a sorcery.
3 in a black.
3 and a black. I said blue, didn't I? Because it was
did.
a B.
It's a B.
Dyslexia is annoying.
There's a B?
There's a B.
Sorry.
We need a break. We need a break. It's Siphon Mind for 3 and a black mana, the one with the skull on it. At a sorcery speed, you will. The spell works like this. It does this. Each other player discards a card. You draw a card for each card discarded this way.
Ever wanted to steal thoughts? Do your happy friends make you just want to vacuum the happiness right out of them and smush it in your sad little noggin? Well, we have the technology. Through the power of empathy, you can... No, that's not right. Where was I? Through the power of the mind siphon, any thought can be yours in the blink of an eye. In fact, you could probably steal the urge to blink, or give it away, probably that one. Take the thoughts of several other people and end up a vastly superior breed of human, like Mark Zuckerberg wishes he could. Get budgeted.
I always feel like I do the exact same laughs out of these.
I've heard them enough times where I'm like, yep.
It's it's me just like coming to terms with what the fact he's actually selling.
Yep.
In fairness, though, the card he's selling here, pretty good ceiling.
Pretty good card draw, even.
He
did the thing.
It was almost like he chose it on purpose.
Say the line, Bart. Anyway, if you enjoyed that, we release text posts every Thursday. I release weekly text.
Don't drag me into this nonsense.
You've been part of the Thursday universe once, and that was enough, I think, for the Thursday episode. Text posts are released every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server, which is also where we hang out with our playgroup. You can check it out. It's linked to the show notes. There's a Thrifty Thursdays channel where I feature a new card every week.
It's fun, and some of them draw cards.
Some of them,
like Siphon Mind does.
Honestly, the reason that so many of them recently draw cards is because I built my Thrifty Thursdays deck.
Oh yeah,
and there
Thursday
was not
incarnate.
enough card draw in there, so I added a bunch more.
Because if you don't know,
I control my own destiny.
If you don't know, there's a line on Walt's custom commander that includes all of these Thursday cards.
Yes.
Where you can go and find out the deck list and get a copy of the card yourself on Patreon, by the way. But there's a line of text that says you lose the game if you cast a spell that has not been featured on Thrifty Thursdays.
Yep.
So Walt's trying to make his deck good by including cards like Mind Siphon.
My thinking is I've obviously neglected this essential part of every commander deck by not playing more of them in Thrifty Thursdays in the past. So I make my deck better by making all of your decks better.
And I reckon we should go from top to bottom, rate our 120 best pieces of card draw. Starting out at 120. We're not going to do that.
We're not going to do 120. But I do think we should evaluate the different ways you can draw cards, the different sort of types of card draw. And we will go into all of them, including some of the ones that don't draw cards. I know it's weird still.
Because we've outlined different types of card draw and card advantage before. Like we've talked about like drawing a bunch of cards all in one, drawing cards through an activated means, and drawing cards passively.
Yeah, every upkeep. We mentioned that a couple of times.
But I reckon we can get more granular now that we're doing like a whole episode on card draw.
I think we can. And like, to be fair, maybe the original deck building, Ultimate Guide to Deck Building, like 14, 15, 16, way back when, we did like break up card draw into 3 categories. I do think I was looking at those categories the other day and I was like, I think that a bit of there's something lost, I think, in the categories that we had. And so I think it's better to talk at a macro scale and go like, okay, this is all the stuff you could encounter.
Let's zoom out.
Let's do it. So I do think we'd be remiss not to talk about the really obvious place to start, which is cards that just say draw this many cards on them.
So we're talking like a harmonized, for example. 2 green, instant, draw 3 cards.
Sorcery.
It's not
He
that
doesn't play much
good.
green, don't worry.
It's not that good. I really wish it was better.
I like harmonized a lot. I think it's still playable in Commander, especially if you're not in blue. Speaking of blue, there's cards like Charter Course, draw 2, and then discard a card unless you attacked. Thirst for Discovery does similar things. You know the cards. In black, we have cards like Night's Whisper. 2 mana, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life.
Even stuff like, what are the sacrifice a creature as an additional cost? Vampiric Rights? No, not Vampiric Rights.
No, that's the enchantment.
What's the
Village Rights?
Village Rights. Got there in the end.
A V and Rights.
Yeah.
And he was right. I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
And a vampire.
Yeah. Stinging Study. Is
that's the one that cares about the CMC of your commander, right?
Yeah, commander in your command zone or on the battlefield. I think it's like 5 mana instant. You lose that much life, but you draw that many cards.
So if you got a beefy commander, that's a good include.
It's a great one. Blue and black are usually the colors of this. Harmonize is explicitly a color break because of the set that it came out in.
Yep.
Even Expels, Pull from Tomorrow, this kind of thing. Look, these cards are very boring. Like, we spoke earlier about how when you're building a deck, card draw is a kind of a thing where you go, I guess I have to put card draw in.
Yeah.
These are like the quintessential examples, right? If you're building a Vorthos deck, you're not going to look at Night's Whisper unless your Vorthos is like, I don't know, Vraska or something.
Yeah.
And go like, Night's Whisper, perfect. If you're building like an X spells deck, you're not going to look at Night's Whisper and go, put that in my deck. Like, it's so rare that these will synergize with your deck. It can happen.
Like an X-Spell deck, we listed Pull for Tomorrow.
You've got a Zaxara, the exemplary deck. It can happen, but most of the time you're including these cards because they'll give you more cards.
Get to 10 at least,
and they're just kind of the best rate, the best way to do it.
Let's be honest. Like, if you said, like, I'm going to only include these type of effects that just have mana value, instant / sorcery speed, draw 2, draw 3, draw 4, or draw X equal to the number of whatever you control, like, your deck will function fine. Like,
it's
honestly,
fine.
If you have enough of these in your deck, you'll still be drawing cards. It's not that complicated.
Yeah. Honestly, my experience with card draw has been that it's very hard to have too much of this. I do think it's good to have card draw that synergizes with your decks, and we'll be going into a bunch of that soon. But I think that, like, don't be afraid of the boredom that sometimes these cards bring, because they are so consistent. Like, draw 2, lose 2 life. When are you ever not going to do that except when you're at 2 life? You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying here, but there is... you said, but I'm going to catch you out a little bit. You said that it's hard to have too much of this. I think you can.
Probably.
Like, in one of my early iterations of Savine, the Chronoclasm, I had even more effects of those, like, Thirst for Discovery type things.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm a Spellslinger deck, so how do Spellslingers keep cards in their hand? Cast instants and sorceries that just say draw 2 cards on them. So you go up with value, still make tokens from Murmuring Mystic and Young Pyromancer. But the early iterations of that deck, I was like, wow, I'm doing nothing else but drawing cards, and I don't have enough of the payoffs to use it. So, like, there is a balancing act here, but the general message is, as long as you've got these in your deck will work. Like, you'll draw enough cards to play your threats and deploy your win cons.
Totally. And if you're scrapped for finding card draw that synergizes with your deck, you can just throw 2 or 3 of these in your deck, and you will be fine, and the deck will be better for it.
Yeah, honestly, like, what's the is it Thirst for Knowledge, the artifact, draw 2 and then discard 2 unless you discard an artifact? I think
so. Thirst for Discovery is draw 2 and then you have to pitch a basic land or 2 cards.
Yeah.
I think Thirst for Knowledge
is the artifact related one, I think.
Because there's an enchantment one as well, I think.
Yeah, there is.
That's Thirst for Discovery. No, that's Thirst... No, shit.
Thirst for something.
Thirst for something.
All the thirsts make you discard a card of a certain type.
It's 2 and a blue, it's an instant, you draw 2 and then you discard a card unless... Discard 2 unless it's one of the chosen thing. Type. So basic land or artifact or enchantment.
But, like, if you're in an enchantment or artifact deck, just throwing that in is like, okay, there you go. I've got, like, something to do. Because
it's fine.
A lot of the things that I really like about this flat draw stuff, I really like the cards that are instant speed.
Yeah.
Because if you hold up mana for a rotation, then go, well, I didn't need to use that counterspell, or I didn't need to use that removal or
that
protection
heroic
spell.
Intervention.
You go, okay, I'll draw more cards on the end step
Yeah.
before my turn. This is where this card draw is like, mwah, I love it. Like,
Yeah.
because it's a mana sink that's in your hand that can put more options for you the next turn into your hand.
It's so rare that you feel bad about this stuff.
Oh.
Like, it's so rare that you draw this card and go, oh, I wish this was X other card. Because it's just like the ceiling is so, not that high. But
Yeah.
the floor is so high, right? Like, it always draws you 2 or it always draws you 3 or, even if it's pulled from tomorrow. Like, if you are hellbent and you draw this, like, it's not... There's card draw we'll go into later where it's like, it does technically draw you cards and it should be tagged as card draw, but on an empty board, it actually won't do very much.
Yeah, this will always, if it resolves, if someone doesn't counterspell it,
Yeah.
it's going to draw you cards.
Yeah.
And that's like creme de la creme, right? That's
I think we rate this like as high as we can rate the card draw, pretty much,
It's
right?
always going to draw you cards. It might not be the most entertaining and might
No.
not give you the most satisfaction from your deck building, but
And I don't think the ceiling is as high as... I think this is below the ceiling of card draw. There's card draw with a higher ceiling than this, but this is the highest floor that we get, I think.
we'll talk about it, but like, for example, 3CMC, there are cards that say 3CMC, like, for example, the one that cares about how many creatures you have with +1 counters on them.
Oh.
What's that card called?
Oh, you draw a card for each of them and they gain indestructible until end of turn.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
what is that
3CMC
card?
an instant. Please
I know.
Scryfall it.
I'll find it. I know the
Thank
one you're
you.
talking about.
But what I'm trying to
actually
say
gonna Mops
here-
Field because it's in one of my decks.
But what I'm trying to say here is like that card has a ceiling where that 3 mana could draw you 10 cards. If you've got
Yeah.
10 creatures with +1 counters on them, 10 cards are being drawn. For
3, yeah.
Thirst for Discovery is only ever going to draw you that 2.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
So, but the thing is, that is true, and that is the ceiling thing. But the floor thing is, okay, you draw Inspiring Call.
Inspiring Call!
You draw Inspiring
Thank
Call
you.
sometimes on an empty board, and you go, man, this would have drawn me so many cards a turn ago before it got board wiped.
But now this 3CMC draws me none.
0. Yeah. So that's kind of the trade-off here. And again, we can't rate this card draw high enough because card draw by its nature increases the consistency of our deck.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything is more consistent than these cards.
No, I don't think so either.
No, but you can get pretty close. Like, for instance, there are a lot more of these than there used to be. Cards, usually permanents, that give you cards. You draw a card when your opponents do things. Usually cast spells.
I smell a... Oh, geez. That's a Ristic Study,
It
I smell. That
it
smells like a
Ristic
lot
up
like
in
a
here.
Ristic Study.
It's smelling very Ristic up in here. Maybe an Ristic... a little Ristic buddy.
Little Ristic...
Little Ristic buddy. Little Ristic Study.
Little Ristic Study. Brandy Cream.
We're doing the Auntie Donna thing again. Esper Sentinel, Ristic Study, Mystic Remora.
Yeah, this is pretty bad in casual, though,
I
to be
think
fair.
Mystic Remora is way overplayed in casual games, for sure.
I think Mystic Remora gets too much like, oh my god, this card is great, because in CEDH, where it's commonly played, you play it on turn 1, and then everyone casts their fast mana acceleration and drops
Yeah.
like
You might
3
draw 5
artifacts.
cards, yeah.
That's an insane rate, but in casual, drop it turn 1. Everyone plays a tap land turn 1.
Yeah.
Pay for the cumulative upkeep turn 2.
Yeah. You
Everyone
paid 2 for 0 cards at this point.
Everyone plays another tap land turn
Yeah.
2. Like it just slows you down as much as it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
not
lot
that great.
easier to play around in casual because I think in general, casual players are playing more creatures. I'm not even going to say in general. I think on average, maybe is the better way to say it.
No,
I think
I'd
the
say-
average casual deck plays
Yeah.
a lot more creatures than a CDH deck. Trouble in Pairs is the latest version
Yeah.
of this. This card is insane. Has
Yeah.
been my experience every
It's-
time I've seen it.
It's really, really good, but also very controversial at the moment. You see all that stuff going on?
The art thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the artist has fully stolen art from several different artists and put them all together.
Stitched it together.
Just fun.
But,
fun
the-
normal magic things.
The text on the card that R&D was responsible
Yes.
for. Good job, R&D.
yeah, it's cracked. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like Mangara the Diplomat, which is another example of
2
this.
white and a white, right?
Yeah,
And
2
with
white
trouble in
whites, an
pairs.
enchantment, this one. Whenever one of your opponents does any of these 3 things, which, spoiler, your opponents
a lot in
do this quite a
Commander.
lot.
Yeah.
Attack you with 2 or more creatures, admittedly that one not so much, but cast their second spell
Yeah.
or draw their second card for the turn.
Yeah, Fairy Mastermind is a really strong version of this effect. It's 2 mana on a blue flying creature. This is a 4 CMC white enchantment
Yeah.
that triggers on that ability and other abilities as well.
The
Like,
main one is the second spell.
it's just so strong.
The amount of times in a game that one of your opponents will not either cast 2 spells in a turn or draw 2 cards in a turn.
Low.
It's like under 10% of the time,
Yeah.
I would say. So like 90% of the time, I reckon this card draws at least 3 cards a turn cycle, right? Because like you're triggering it, the next player's triggering it, and sometimes you draw two cards off that player, 2 cards off that player, 1 card off this
Could
player.
draw you like 5, 6 cards every single turn.
And it's a permanent.
It's so strong.
The other day, I played a game of this at on kitchen table, and it got dropped, and we were all like, "Man, I think this card is like better than we think it is," and we all agreed on that. And we were like, "Let's just see how many cards it draws." Nobody answered it, not because we were like experimenting, just because there were other more problematic things, and it flew under the radar. I reckon
it flew under the radar, even though all of you were like, "Wow, this card is busted."
Yeah, but still, the card drew. I reckon the player who had trouble in pairs drew over 10 cards over the course of about 3 turns.
10 cards over 3 turns.
I reckon it stayed on the battlefield for about 5 turns before someone was finally like, I think it was me. I was like, get this out of here.
Generous gift, that shit.
Yeah, I got it out the hell out of there. But yeah, when your opponents do stuff quite often in Commander.
And I think that like the thing that I really like about these cards, like Rhystic Study, like Mangara even, is even if they're not drawing you cards, they have an effect on the game at large. We talked about this in our episode of
Noticing Absence.
Noticing Absence.
We talked about this a lot. It's they're kind of soft stacks pieces because people are less likely to try to trigger them because they know they'll give you a card.
Yeah,
right?
well, like for example, Rhystic Study, if your opponent casts a spell and doesn't pay for Rhystic Study, great, you put a card into your hand. That's awesome.
Yeah.
If they do pay for Rhystic Study, awesome. You've made that spell cost 1 more.
Yeah.
And every spell that they're casting is now 1 more. So the advantage that you get on them over a long period of time is pretty exponential.
Yeah. They're extremely strong.
Yeah.
There's a reason that these cards are staples of both casual and in some cases CDH as well.
Also, they usually carry a pretty hefty price tag on them.
That's
Rhystic
the big
Study,
downside.
Esper Sentinel.
Yeah.
We also talked about Trouble in Pairs is now getting like to $10 nearly.
Much higher.
Seriously?
I checked my collections tab on Moxfield. That's just come out twice in the same episode. Moxfield, you're so good. We love you. Sponsor us, please. I checked my collections tab on Moxfield the other day. Not today, actually. And I sorted by price because I'm just curious sometimes about where cards are moving.
Yeah.
And I think like the 4th most expensive card I own now is my copy of Trouble in Pairs from the pre-con that we opened.
No way.
It's like $39
Whoa,
or something
what?
silly. I think people are finally waking up to how busted it is because it was about $8 for a long time.
Look, I'm not going to say it's a great CDH card, but if you're in mono white, I would play it.
It's fine.
I would play it.
I think it's much stronger in casual, where I think the drawing 2 cards a turn and casting 2 spells a turn, that happens almost every turn in casual, like we said. But yeah, look, all these cards that we've talked about, with the exception of Mystic Remora, which I think is more CDH, they're all great. If you have them, you will very rarely feel bad about having them. I think that some of these are worse than others, like Mangara, for instance. Sometimes you won't draw a card off Mangara, but they stick around. People tend not to answer them, with the exception maybe of very experienced players.
And it's also the other thing that I like about these cards. I play a lot of these cards.
You do.
I really like the fact that it's like I'll invest now and I'll draw cards later, and it will feel like free cards.
Yeah,
it's a really dumb thing that I do with like my budgeting of my real life money. I'm like, I'll buy these $160 concert tickets by November. It'll feel like a free concert.
Yeah, I paid ages ago.
Yeah,
that money's gone.
It's free.
It's gone forever.
What a cool free concert.
It's like when you get a refund for something that you never got. Like someone like sends you something in the mail, it never comes, and then you get a refund like a year later for it, and you're like, free money.
Yeah.
Free money.
I just got $100 on a pair of jeans I never got.
No, you're at net zero right now. No, they're extremely strong.
You break parity on them really well with your opponents.
So easy to. They're extremely good. Extremely good. You can't feel bad about them.
All right, should we talk about cards that just like slowly but surely just put extra cards in your hand? Maybe not as quickly as those cards like Trouble in Pairs, but
more consistently.
Usually guarantee you an extra card or an extra 2 cards every turn cycle.
We're getting more and more of these. Phyrexian Arena is a really obvious example. Draw an extra card in your upkeep.
One, right?
Yeah, that's the absolute classic. Even Bob, Dark Confidant, flips a card off the top in your upkeep. You put that card into your hand. Black Market Connections is the recent and very strong example of this, because you can also make a treasure and also make a 3/2 changeling.
And it's also modal. You don't have to
as
well. It's really cool. You pay life for each effect.
Yeah.
It's very strong.
You should full send, of course, in honor of
Full
Josh Lee Quies.
send.
Full send. Classic card. Look, I think you got to acknowledge that these are a card where they don't draw you any cards when you cast them.
Yeah, these
At
are
all.
something that you, in my opinion, these cards get really good when you can break them somehow.
Yes,
So,
I mean, you have, we've already mentioned this, you've got a double upkeep triggers deck,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
So Dictate, is it Kumena? The Dictate.
Kumena's Awakening.
Kumena's Awakening,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. Kumena's Awakening, it's a 4 CMC enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card, except if you have the City's Blessing, just you draw a card.
Yep.
In Commander, we get the City's Blessing pretty easily.
Yep.
It's not a problem.
Very easy.
But if you are playing a multiple upkeep deck, which, by the way, the new Obeka, I'm sure some of you will want to play multiple upkeep decks.
Yeah.
This card is insanity. It will draw you. It could draw you like 3-4 cards with an Obeka, the Splitter of Time or whatever a new card is.
Splitter of Seconds, I think?
Splitter of Seconds?
Yeah.
I don't know. But like multiple, if you've got multiple upkeep triggers, if you're running Paradox Haze, if
Yeah.
you're running Sphinx of the Second Sun,
Yep.
these cards are sick. Love
Yeah.
them.
I also would point to decks that want to have a very high permanent count, i.e. you don't want instants and sorceries. I'm talking now from experience. I have my Vevictus Asmati deck. This is my semi-recent Jund Goblins list.
Yeah, you
But
don't want to
basically-
reveal an instant off the top with
No,
Vevictus,
so
do you?
Vevictus Asmati basically blows up a permanent on each player's board, including your own, and then you flip the top card of each player's library, and permanents just get put on the battlefield under the control of the player who flipped it.
So Phyrexian Arena is better than a, like, you know, like a Knight's Whisper,
Yes.
for example, which
Yeah,
is what we talked about just before, which
Yeah.
is just draw 2 cards, lose 2 life.
Yes, the consistency of Knight's Whisper is there, but in my specific deck, I want to always flip permanents at the top. So I think I have 6 instants or sorceries in the whole deck.
Yep.
So I want my card draw, where possible, to be permanents that sit on the battlefield. And so in this case, Phyrexian Arena, I agree. I think you usually want to be breaking these cards, and in my case, I'm breaking parity, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, other people are less likely to flip permanents than I am, and my permanents feel better to flip onto the battlefield.
And
like,
your permanents can draw you cards now?
yeah, exactly. I agree. I think that probably...
Make them better.
Make them better. I think these cards are slightly overplayed. Would you agree with that?
I disagree slightly. I think
Okay.
that people could afford to play more of these. I know Phyrexian Arena, like the rate on Phyrexian Arena has just gone down, but I think if you're currently struggling to make sure your deck is giving you enough cards, like if you're experiencing times when you're hellbent,
Yeah.
these cards as an include are just really consistent ways to make sure you're putting extra cards in hand. They smooth your draws. Yeah, they smooth your draws, but the other thing that they do is fly under the radar exceptionally well. Trouble
They
in
do.
Pairs, holy hell, that's a target to remove.
Yeah.
Phyrexian Arena,
No.
I feel really bad generous gifting a Phyrexian Arena.
Nobody's going to do it until basically either you're breaking it, like we said before, or if you're the removal is free. You know, if something's like, you're like, oh, I could destroy one enchantment, or I could cycle this. Here's a great
destroy all example.
artifacts and enchantments. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like if you see it for Phyrexian Arena and 5 other good enchantments, you might be like, oh, it probably is good to play my enchantment board wipe right now.
Yeah,
you
or
know?
if it's like, for example, someone cast a Casualties of War. And,
you just have to choose
there
an
is like
enchantment.
only a Phyrexian Arena on the board.
Yeah, you'll
then you may
obviously
as well
target
hit it.
Or if it's like Phyrexian Arena or one of those auras that goes on a land and it taps for extra mana, you're going to blow up Phyrexian Arena,
100%,
obviously.
but like-
yeah, people aren't like, generous gift. People aren't like going, oh, I better use my generous gift on your Phyrexian Arena.
Yeah.
And so consequently, you might draw 4, 5, 10
But
cards off this.
let's just say in the perfect world, the ceiling of these cards, you play Phyrexian Arena on curve, on turn 3.
Yep.
You play Phyrexian Arena.
Yep.
That card, 3 mana, let's say it goes to turn 9, that card's drawn you 6 cards.
Yeah.
That's a
ceiling's
pretty good
there.
rate.
The
Like-
ceiling is definitely there. And I do think, like, I've played not a lot of these, admittedly, in my decks because I do chase consistency in my card draw in general, and I don't like drawing these off the top.
Yeah.
But I do think they're better than I thought they were. And I think that they do fly under the radar, and yeah, they're a totally valid include, and they're often very consistent in your decks.
I'm not going to say they're my favorite type of card draw,
No.
but they serve their purpose in lots of decks.
Yes, and like we said earlier, if you can break them, absolutely play them.
Yeah, 100%.
This is a really generic category. Triggers when you do things.
Okay, so now we're in the realm of like, these cards are put in your deck specifically because they're synergizing with something you're already going to be doing in your deck.
So, like-
and you can nearly guarantee that you're doing it every turn anyway.
Yeah, so this is like, we've talked a few times on this podcast about doing the thing, how many cards
Yeah.
that do the thing. So if your deck is a Spellslinger deck, for instance, so you want to be playing 30, maybe 35, 40 instants or sorceries in your deck, then an Archmage Emeritus
Oh, yeah, baby.
will feel really good. This is the Magecraft, so whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, draw a card. That's going to feel really good in your deck because 30 to 40 of the spells that you cast in a game, in any given game, like at random obviously, but will draw you a card, replace themselves in your hand.
And like, let's just look at mana value comparison here. Kumena's Awakening, 4 CMC, 2 blue and a blue.
Yep.
Archmage Emeritus, 2 blue and a blue.
Yep.
I'm going to draw way more cards off Archmage Emeritus than I would with a Kumena's Awakening.
It's true. These tend to be slightly more sensitive to removal because they're often creatures. A lot of the time these are creatures, but the ceiling, again, is probably even higher than what we just looked at, where, you could drop an Enchantress effect, for instance, like a Misia Enchantress that says, whenever you cast an enchantment, draw a card. And if you just have like 5 1-mana enchantments in your hand the turn that you play that, you just go, cool, enchantment, draw a card. Enchantment, draw a card. Like that, you can draw 5 cards that turn.
Yeah.
That can be 3 mana, draw 5 cards.
And if your deck is already doing that thing, like if you're already playing an Enchantress deck and you've got Mesa Enchantress and Citizen's Champion, then that 1 mana enchantment becomes 2 cards.
Yeah.
Like if you stack these effects on top of each other, you are wildly ahead on your card draw.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I'm trying to make this kind of make sense to you. Every card in your hand, when it leaves your hand, is replaced by 2. It's like the cutting the head off a Hydra and 2 grow in its place. You just become more threatening.
Yeah.
It's so strong.
It's so good. And we're getting more and more of these that trigger from more and more things.
Yep.
You've got Pure Steel Paladin effects that trigger when you cast equipment.
So like Shram is also one of those.
Yes, Shram triggers on auras or auras and equipment. That's a common one we're seeing these days. Auras and equipment trigger stuff. There's stuff that triggers from basically anything you could want your deck to do.
Artifacts, Joyra. There you go. There's another
There's cast a creature spell, draw a card. There's
Beast
creatures
Whisperer.
enter the battlefield, draw a card.
Garruk's Uprising.
Yep.
We could go on forever.
You can just go on and on. Basically, for any commander archetype you want to play, if you're going hard enough into that archetype, there is a card out there that probably triggers when you cast 30 to 40% of the spells in your deck.
And we
It's
talk
great.
about them in our archetypes episodes.
Yes, we've highlighted a bunch of them. But look, I think these are really, really great. They're typically very, very... They're a bit glass cannony, right? Like, if you...
Boom or bust.
Yeah, for this, every time that you cast Archmage Emeritus and draw 10 cards over the course of 3 turns, sometimes you'll deploy it and tap out, and then someone board wipes, and you're like, cool, my card draw spell just drew me 0 cards.
My card draw spell was a 2/4 for a hot second. Yeah. And that was it,
And look, you can sequence correctly, like, and try and hold these until you can trigger them a bunch. Like, that can help save you, but...
That's what I would do.
Yes, it is. That's the James way. But just in general, I think you're more likely to go boom. They're just a bit boom or bust. The ceiling is so high, and I'm not going to deny I play a bunch of these in my decks. My Enchantress deck has like 8.
Well,
I think,
I've seen you have like 4 of these Enchantress style effects on the field at once, and I'm like, we are losing to Walt in 3 turns if we do not answer any of this.
It's a huge problem because it's just explosive.
Yeah.
The number of cards you can draw. Obviously, we've said it several times, but you need to have enough of the cards that will trigger this thing. I've seen a few people, especially when they're going off EDH Rec, they'll build a commander deck and they're building like a Voltron deck. And they see on EDH Rec that people are playing a bunch of the Enchantress effects. They're playing Argothian Enchantress or something.
But then they're more heavy on equipment in their version of the deck.
But then their deck has like 5 auras in it. And I'm like, look, that card, Argothian Enchantress, is a friggin' incredible magic card. In your deck, it's really, really bad. So you've got to make sure you're doing that thing. 25 to 30 cards that trigger one of these, you're golden.
Yeah, I think it's like when you just run down the stats of it, it's like, okay, what are the chances that you'll have something in your hand that triggers Archmage Emeritus when he's on the battlefield?
Yeah.
If you have 30 instants and sorceries in your deck, the likelihood that you'll have 1 or 2 instants and sorceries in your hand when Archmage Emeritus is down, pretty high.
Very high.
Yeah.
Very, very, very high. You just got to run the odds a little bit on this.
Yeah.
In a similar vein, there's a bunch of these. I mean, it's the same vein, really. A vein that you could tap into and drink blood from.
Oh, you're talking Vein Ripper.
I guess so.
So we're talking aristocrats effects now.
Things.
Yeah, sure.
Things that trigger when things die.
Yep.
Morbid Opportunist is a favorite of ours.
I missed this card in like all of the spoiler seasons, and then Walt put it in like 3 of his decks.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, this 3-mana creature draws a card at everyone's turn.
Yep.
Like, the likelihood it draws you a card, it basically draws a card whenever a non-token... Oh, no, just a creature dies.
If a creature dies, it draws a card. Only triggers once a turn. But the thing is, any creature on the battlefield dies, you draw the card.
At any point, like through combat, whether someone sacks a creature, whether someone destroys another creature.
Yeah.
I challenge you to go through a game of Commander and just note every single turn, not turn cycle, every turn, see if a creature dies.
Yeah.
And just have a little tally next to you, how many times a creature dies.
And look, you're playing this in an Aristocrats deck, so you're drawing a card every single one of your turns. So the floor of this, assuming you can keep it, is Phyrexian Arena, right? You're drawing a card every turn, and then yes, the amount of time one of your opponents swings at someone and they chump, you draw a card. The amount of time someone sacks a creature, you draw a card.
But in the other same vein, if you're playing an Aristocrats deck and you have an Ophiomancer and an Ashnod's Altar and Morbid Opportunist, if no creatures die during combat or no one destroys a creature, on the end step before they pass, you go, oh, I haven't drawn a card from Morbid Opportunist yet. I'll sacrifice my snake to Ashnod's Altar, draw a card, pass turn, in your upkeep, make a snake.
It's so sick. Just the Morbid Opportunist and a free sack outlet and Ophiomancer specifically. Feels
Great
so good.
combo.
Feels so good. Especially if the sack outlet scries, like for Seraseer.
Oh, you
do technically draw a card and then scry one, but you're still setting up the next draw. Anyway, it's very, very good.
It's very strong.
There's some sack outlets that do this. Vampiric Rites, you pay 1 and a black
that was
sack
that card
a creature.
I thought of.
This is the one we came up earlier. Pay 1 and a black sack a creature, draw a card. Plum the Forbidden, I really like.
Yep.
This is the Strixhaven 1 and a black instant. For every creature you sack, you copy it, and you draw a card and lose a life. And so you sack 5 creatures, you draw 6 cards. You sack 10 creatures, you draw 11 cards. Very cool.
Really, really good on boards that work with it. So if you're in that Aristocrats strategy and you're going to be making 20 tokens from your Ink Shield or something like that, woohoo, you've got a gas card draw engine.
If you're a deck that is just like playing Blood Artist and playing, Falconwrath Noble and any of these effects that say, drain people's life when creatures die,
why not draw a card at the same time?
Yeah, you absolutely want these.
Yeah.
And Morbid Opportunist, I was going to say Taste of Karlov decks. It won't trigger again.
No, because it says only triggers once per turn.
Yeah, it specifically is preventing you from doing that.
Taste of Karlov decks actively don't want it. But there's tons of these effects.
Yes, they're very good. They're very good.
Can we talk about one of my favorite methods of drawing cards now?
Sure.
Can we talk about wheels?
Wheels.
So we're talking about cards like Windfall.
Yeah.
Each player discards their hand, draws up to the cards equal. Everyone draws cards equal to the number of cards, the greatest number of cards discarded this way.
Yep. So if I've got 5 cards and James has 10, he casts Windfall. We all discard our hands and draw up to 10 if James has the most.
We obviously have like the reserve list Wheel of Fortune, but then we have our great complicated version of that called Wheel of Misfortune.
Yeah.
This is effectively a guessing game, but if you want to wheel, you can bid life and just discard and draw up to 7.
Yep.
These cards are so strong if you are in colors like red.
Yeah.
If you're in red colors and only red, like, oh my god, you really struggle to draw cards, but there are lots of cards that can draw you a lot in one go.
Yeah.
And wheels are one of the best versions of this. You've got Valakut Awakening now as well.
Oh, yeah, this kind of wheels as much of your hand as you want away, and you draw that many +1. Yep.
I just think in strategies where you are just spewing out your hand and you need a way to like get back up to pace, just a refresh in a form of a wheel, 10 out of 10.
Definitely. I think these are weirdly better the worse the rest of your card draw is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like if you're in mono red, you are always the one who wins the most from the wheel because all the rest of your hand doesn't draw you cards.
Or the rest of your hand has already been cast and the wheel is the last thing in your hand.
What feels better than casting a wheel with an empty hand and someone else has got 8 cards and you're like, cool, you've effectively discarded a card.
Yep.
I just drew 7.
Yeah, it's very strong. And I also think that like in the same way that we were talking about cards that when we're trying to break the cards to make them better, wheels are really good cards to break. They're like Nekusar, for example. Nekusar screams, make your opponents draw cards along with me.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of these things that you can easily break. Like,
definitely. I mean, I described my Azor the Lawbringer deck earlier as a wheels deck.
Yeah.
Because I knew that was probably the shorthand way of describing to a lot of you out there what the deck does, which is just draw draw a bunch of cards.
Yeah.
And usually the most effective way to do this is these kind of wheel effects.
Yeah, if your deck cares about any kind of card being drawn, so if you're running a Psychosis Crawler, a Chasm Skulker, anything that says whenever you draw a card, you do the thing or get a benefit, wheels are a great way to accelerate that into times 10 mode. Instead of just drawing 2 cards, now you're drawing 10.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. I think we should definitely talk about the card draw that cares about creatures, specifically big creatures. There's a bunch of these. There's sort of different versions they come in. There's stuff like, cards that care about big creatures entering the battlefield. Like you mentioned Garrick's Uprising before.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a bunch of these cards that just like draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control.
Usually feature Garruk on the artwork.
Or sometimes in the name, like Garruk, Primal Hunter.
Oh, yeah, the Planeswalker that literally enters with 3 loyalty, down ticks to
By
3 to draw cards equal to the greatest power of creatures you control.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these. Return of the Wild Speaker I already highlighted. Rishkar's Expertise is a really good one.
I'm just straight up really hot on that cycle. I just think like even Yahenni's Expertise, I know that it's like not the specific type that we're talking about, but this card gives you extra value by casting an extra spell from your hand for free.
Yeah.
After you have drawn cards.
Yeah.
Like you get more options.
It's so sick. There's even sort of permanents to do this, like Greater Good.
Yep.
You can sack a creature and draw cards equal to its power, then discard 3.
And there's Life Legacy effects as well, like Life Legacy.
Oh,
the card.
specifically sack. Yeah, it's a sorcery. Sack the creature, draw cards equal to its power.
Disciple Abolish does the same thing.
Yeah, Momentous Fall, I think, is a similar thing.
There's a bunch of those kind of things.
There's a lot of those. Again, if your deck is already caring about creatures being big, these are so good. The ceiling is so high. Like
you will often draw more than a wheel would draw you.
You will. Like I play pretty much every one of these I can get my hands on in my Mowu Loyal Companion deck. This is my sort of Voltron-y +1 counters-y kind of thing. It's very feasible in that deck to get Mowu to 10, 12 power.
I've seen you draw like 20 cards off some
I've
of
drawn
these.
20 or more cards with like a Return of the Wild Speaker kind of effect. The likelihood that you don't win from there is pretty low if you draw 20 cards off the top.
Look, if your creatures, I think I'm gonna say if you've got consistently creatures that are 5 power and up, you should be running these cards. Like if you're in a Hydra type build, if you're
even
in
dragons,
dinosaurs,
like angels,
angels is pretty good
for it.
If you're in like an Abzan Angels list, if you have like a Garruk's Uprising, every time an angel enters, draw a card. Pretty good.
That's gonna feel really
bad.
I think like obviously the floor of these is really low. We basically have already mentioned it before, but the ceiling being as high as it is means that you can just get away with playing 8 or 9 card draw pieces that are just this.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Instead of big creatures, let's go lots of creatures.
Lots of creatures. There's so many ways to draw cards like this.
It's probably because this is an archetype that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Tokens, go wide. It's a very recognizable commander strategy. You've got cards like that care about like creature types. So like draw a card equal to the number of types of a creature you have.
Distant Melody.
Distant Melody. Thank you. I was trying to think of the name of that card.
No, that's all right. Transcendent Message is a recent one. This one's got Convoke, but it's an X-Spell, draws a bunch
Sick
of cards. We both play Keep Watch. This was a Thrifty Thursdays card.
Love Keep Watch.
2 and a blue, it's an instant. You draw a card for each attacking creature you control. Or not you control. Someone can be attacking you, and you could draw a card for the number of attacking creatures.
Which is why I love it.
Yeah, very good. Shamanic Revelation sort of effects that literally just draw cards equal to the number of creatures you have.
Yep.
There are so many, usually in green and white.
But even like cards like Takashi is Welcome and Welcoming Vampire.
Oh yeah, they care about small creatures entering the battlefield.
Yeah. If you know that you're going to make like 1 or 2 tokens that are 1/1s every turn.
Yeah.
Oh, Welcoming Vampire? Give me one of those.
Yeah. Oh, if your commander especially makes tokens, and especially if it's consistently makes tokens, these become absolutely busted.
Reese the Redeemed decks. Here you go.
Huge fan. Even Idol of Oblivion.
Yeah.
We play a bunch of this, I think, me and you. This is the 2-mana artifact. You tap it to draw a card if you've created a token this turn.
And then it sacks to make a 10/10.
It does.
That's why I play it.
Yeah, you used to have it in your Brutacard list, I remember. So having that 10/10 token to make everything into...
It's pretty good.
Feels pretty good. But look, again, there's a recurring theme here, but if you have a bunch of creatures in your deck, if a bunch of them are small, if you're going to go wide, your card draw being this is going to make the most sense.
For sure.
I'm interested now. Okay, we're moving down quite a lot. I think pretty much everything we've talked about so far, we've rated pretty highly.
Sure.
What do you think of clue tokens?
Ooh.
So these are the tokens, the artifact tokens that you pay 2 generic mana, you sacrifice them to draw a card. The typical example would be Tireless Tracker here, right? Like landfall, make a clue.
My mind went straight there because I play that in my Phyleth deck.
It's probably the most played clue card in Commander, if I had to guess.
Well, there's that, like, I played that precon from Commander's, the Commander precon from Murders at
Murders Karlov Manor.
Karlov Manor.
Waited for me to do it.
Far out, Karlov Manor. And that was fun, but I don't think I used clues a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, because paying 2 to draw a card is a fine rate. It's not great.
Fine.
But it's also not bad. It's just kind of fine.
Look, if your deck cares about either tokens or artifacts, great. Like, these synergize. If your deck wants to run something like an Academy manufacturer, by all means, clues, probably good for you.
I think in the same way, you talked before about how much you rate cards like Thirst for Discovery because they're instant speed. So if you want to hold up mana already, you can sink them into this.
So I like clues for that.
Are great for that as well, I think. Like, for instance, I talk about it all the time, I know, but my Gandalf the White deck.
Oh, really? I've not heard about this one.
A couple times, right? Yeah. Clues are so good in that deck because my whole deck has flash, right?
Yeah.
And so worst comes to worst, if I don't want to flash something in, so say someone board wipes, and it's like, oh, cool, if I flash creatures in, they're going to die. Just like, cool, I'll just pay 6 mana, draw 3 cards with these 3 clues.
You've got Sarah Jane Smith that makes the clues in that deck, right?
So unbelievably good in specifically that card. It says, whenever you cast a historic spell, create a clue token.
That's amazing.
Triggers only once per turn. However, in Gandalf the White, you can flash something in on James's turn.
So you make 4 clues a rotation. It's really strong.
It's really, really sick
Look,
for a 2-mana creature.
I think clues are fine. Like, I think if they're synergizing with your deck, fantastic.
Yeah.
But, like, don't run a card that's just, like, make 4 clues.
No.
And then you're banking on that to be your card draw.
Yeah.
That feels a bit slow.
It's very slow. You kind of already want to, either be sacking artifacts or, like, making tokens or anything like that. They become a lot better. But in general, you can probably do better.
Yeah.
Similar vein, like creatures with ETB or LTB. So like enter the battlefield effects like Muldrifter, enter the battlefield, draws 2 cards, or even leave the battlefield effects like Solemn Simulacrum, dies and draws a card. How do you reconcile these? Where do they go on your list?
Again, if you're playing the deck that can break it, do it. If you're playing a Reanimator deck that can loop Solemn Simulacrum over and over and over and over again, play it. If you're playing a Flicker deck where you're having Muldrifter ETB from Evoke, flickering it before the Evoke trigger kills it, and having it re-enter every single turn because you're using Teleportation Circle, play it. If you're in a deck that is running Panharmonicon, play these cards. These cards are really easy to break if you're in that strategy.
Yeah, you kind of want to be getting that ETB more than once, right?
Well, like when was the last time you saw a deck with Muldrifter and not Panharmonicon?
Yeah, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
It's a mistake to do that because you're just paying 5 mana for a 2/2 flyer and drawing 2 cards. You can do so much better in Commander. Like so much better. But yeah, as you say, if you have that teleportation circle on the battlefield, this might be draw 2 cards every single turn. Yeah.
That's 10 times better than that.
That's what kind of the caliber of stuff you want to be doing before you turn to Muldrifter. For instance, I play Muldrifter in my Arami deck because
you make 3 versions of Muldrifter.
And also the fact that it evokes to draw 2.
You can put it into the graveyard.
In the bin,
I like it in that deck, actually. That's very cool.
Very good in a deck like that. Yeah, like you have to have a strong reason to include it. I completely agree with you. And don't play Wall of Omens, the 2-mana creature that enters the battlefield, draws a card. If you're calling that card draw in your deck, you better have ways to play that Wall of Omens a bunch of times, or flicker it, or reanimate it, or something.
Or you're playing a wall type deck.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go.
Even then, I reckon there are better walls these days.
Probably,
There's that 3-mana wall that's like a 0/7 and it's got flying and shroud inexplicably.
Why?
You can do better than Wall of Omens.
All right, let's move out of those colors and into red because I feel like impulse draw is something we've talked a lot about, and I think there is straight up no other color that does it Full stop.
Yep.
Other than red.
It's just red. This is the way that red draws cards. So impulse draw is like the sort of colloquial term we'll use for when we exile cards, usually from the top of our library, and you can play them until the end of turn or the end of your next turn, something like that.
Yeah.
But we call it impulse because, well, it's cards like called impulse that do
yes,
this.
reckless impulse.
Reckless impulse does it.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically it's the idea is it's like card draw temporarily, right?
Yes.
It's like they're in your hand, but only for a turn or only for 2 turns or something like that.
So like you got Commune with Lava, which is an X version of this effect, which is great. Valakut Exploration is really
landfall,
strong.
Impulse 1 off the top.
Yep. Escape to the Wilds, really commander staple now. Jessica's Will, something we're all super familiar with.
Exile's top 3. You add red equal to the cards in someone's hand.
If you have your commander, you can only choose one if you don't. But there's a ton of these effects.
Yeah.
And look, if you've got synergy with this, again, like if you're in a Prosper Tomebound deck, when it cares about being cast from exile, oh my god, these cards are great.
Yep. There's that Gruul commander that like cares about specific when it casts card from exile, you make a wolf.
Oh yeah, that was
I
a
always
weird
forget
card.
the name of it. Very cool.
Tolmir? It starts with a no. Tolsamir is the guy with the Voja. He's the guy with the pet dog Voja.
It is Tolsan. Anyway, one of those ones from Innistrad somewhere.
Tell us in the comments below.
Yes. If you have synergy with these, absolutely, they can be absolutely insane.
But let's be real, actual card draw is better than this.
It is.
Yeah.
Unless you're synergizing with it, or if you are in only red.
Yes.
Like, because basically every color at this point draws cards better. White, maybe not.
White's getting there.
Yeah.
But if you're in a Boros deck, I would allow you to play Impulse Draw. But if you're
Boros is quite good at this, actually.
Yeah.
Like, got cards like Bell Borka, I think. That exiles a card at the beginning of every turn. There's that one semi-recent one. It was like a Precon commander that exiles a card for each player you attack or something off the top. Boros has got like a few commanders that do this now.
I think it's like a way to make colors that are lacking in card draw like white a little bit better. But like if you're in green and you're doing big creature stuff, do the big creature stuff we were doing before. Don't play Impulse Draw in your, Gruul deck because you're doing big creatures. Play the big creature stuff.
Yeah.
Impulse Draw is further down on this list for a bit of a reason.
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think we're right at the cusp of what is even we would consider a card draw spell or card in our deck.
Sure.
Specifically for, well, I know we often, like, you've got your card advantage, like, and card selection tag. I often start to, when I start to reach the bottom of this list, count cards as half a card, right? So for the purposes of reaching 15 bits of card draw in my deck, some of these, maybe Impulse Draw, Impulse Draw is right on the cusp for me. I would start to call half of a card draw spell.
We go into that. What do we consider that half a slot? Because
I think Impulse Draw I still consider on the top. I think I would still count this as a card.
I think that because you're getting access to like multiple cards, even if it's just for that turn or for a turn cycle, I consider that enough advantage to be called draw. Yeah, but I think. Let's talk about the ones that we would consider just advantage or selection. Sure. It might even be a better word for it.
Yeah.
Should we talk about cantrips first?
Cantrips are right at the top of this section of the list, where I think they're very good, right? Like we're talking like Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm. These cards typically go 2 to 3 cards deep in your deck. Let you draw at least one of them.
But they only ever replace the spell itself.
Yes, unless you have other things happening, you only go up a card, and you're spending a card to get that card, right? So Preordain, yes, you scry 2, then draw a card, but Preordain is gone from your hand. So if you had 6 cards in hand, cast Preordain, you still got 6 cards in hand.
So you've not drawn a card. No, even though it said you drew a card.
You've gone neutral. And they're very good. Like for smoothing out draws, especially in the early game, like hitting your land drops, these can be so good.
I really like seeing a Preordain in my opening hand when I don't have, like I've only got 2 lands.
You can keep a 2-land hand with a Preordain because you can
Definitely can.
Like what's worst case scenario, you go top 2, neither of them are lands. You put them both on the bottom, draw that card.
So that's 3 cards deep.
If that's not a land, you have the next draw to draw a land.
Now you're 4 cards deep.
And then you can play land that turn because you've got 2 lands. You can get 1 more card off the top, assuming you don't have any other card draw. You have 5 attempts at hitting your 3rd land drop now because of Preordain.
Otherwise, you would have waited 5 turns to find that extra land. Like that's amazing in the early game. And to smooth out draws, amazing. But they're not drawing you a lot of cards. It's just kind of like smoothing out your options. Yeah. This is why I would call it advantage/selection.
Sure. And if I had, in my decks, I would tag these as card draw, but they get half a slot.
Yeah, fair enough.
Unless you can recur them, but anyway, like everything.
I think the next level down from that for me would be like scrying then. Because
Yeah,
like
sure.
scrying, like if we're talking about like Brainstorm does actually put a card from your library into your hand,
Yes.
scrying just tells you what you're going to draw next.
Yeah, you never go up a card when you scry.
Yeah.
So like Viscera Seer is the sack outlet that does this, which is a great card.
Yeah.
Path of Ancestry is the land. There's the temple lands, the 2
Yeah.
color lands that scry one when they ETB.
But do not like fully tag these as card draw in your deck, people. Like,
No.
this does not count as a slot
No.
at all. Never will scrying 1 draw you a card unless there is a card that says whenever you what was it, Elegith is the card I'm thinking of.
The commander, the blue commander that says when you scry, instead draw that many cards.
If you're running Elegith, oh my god, run
Yeah.
these cards 100%. But
Absolutely.
literally in every other commander deck,
Yeah.
this ain't it, Chief.
No, it again, they're really good. They're going to find you lands. They're going to help you to hit the gas in your deck sooner, but they don't draw you cards, so you can't consider them card draw for the purposes of tagging your 15 pieces of card draw in your deck.
At the very most, do what Walt does, consider it half a slot. But that's it.
So for reference, like my Cards of Wizards deck I went into earlier and how it has like 21 or 22 card draw tagged things in there, a lot of them are scry.
Just ETB, scry,
Yep, a lot of
and
them's
stuff like that. Yeah.
Wizards that ETB and scry. It's there's a wizard that looks at the top X cards of your library where X is the number of wizards you control, and you put them back in
scrying.
any order.
Effectively scrying.
Basically a scry.
Yeah.
Path of Ancestry's in there. Like, yeah, scrying, they help a lot, but they never ever draw you a card.
Sure.
I would put, oh God, it's hard to say which is better out of this and scry, but Surveil.
Oh, I might consider surveilling even better than scrying. Because
It
if
really
you
depends on the deck.
if
I
you've
think.
got graveyard synergies,
Any graveyard synergy whatsoever.
Amazing.
So, surveilling for reference, it'll have a number next to it like Scry. So it'll say like Surveil 1 or Surveil 2 or something.
Mm-hmm.
You look at that many cards on the top of your library, you can put them back in any order, or you can put them in the graveyard. Any number of them.
Yeah.
So Otherworldly Gaze is a favorite of ours because we've known so many Otherworldly Gaze in our life.
Darcy, Dragon Rage Channeler,
Dragon's Rage Channeler, Surveils when you cast an instant or sorcery. Even like
non-creature spell.
Non-creature. Oh my god.
So good.
That card's so sick.
Amazing.
Modern staple. Search for Cantor has been errated to say Surveil 1.
Consider another one.
Yep, considers the cantrip that does it. The new lands.
I was just about to. We were
Yeah.
talking about this literally just this afternoon.
The new cycle of lands. So they printed these in Murders at Karlov Manor.
Nailed it.
Hey,
Yeah.
you got there. MKM. There's 2. They're typed jewels for 1, so you can fetch them with fetch lands, that kind of thing. They enter tapped, but you surveil 1. So they like the scry lands, but instead you surveil, and they have types. Importantly, for
Yeah.
a lot of decks, very very important. Look, if you have any graveyard synergy whatsoever,
Use these cards.
yeah, these cards are so sick.
It not only smooths your draws, but it also smooths what you want in your bin.
Yeah.
So for example, if you are doing stuff like reanimating creatures, if you cast an Otherworldly Gaze, look at the top 3, all of them are big CMC creatures that you want to cheat back out by casting Reanimate on.
Yeah.
All of them go to the bin.
Yeah.
And then your next draw is something like a Distant Melody. So you draw cards equal to the number of zombies you control. How much better is that than like, I don't know, just scrying 2 in that graveyard deck?
It's a lot better than scrying if you care about the cards in the graveyard.
Exactly.
I mean, even both of us have, weirdly, decks that care about flashing back spells from the graveyard. I dare say that both of us are playing Otherworldly Gaze in those decks because sometimes you look at the top 3, there's 3 instants or sorceries in there, and you're like, I want to cast all those with flashback. Chuck them in the bin.
All of them in the bin.
Yeah.
That's really strong.
I think, again, I'm not calling this a true card draw slot, but I do think this is right up there in terms of choosing the cards that you're going to get soon, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, I think in the same vein, my brain is now working on like graveyard strategies. Looting and rummaging, these kinds of effects are also... I would consider like half a card's draw slot in my counting, or maybe I'd put them in my card advantage / selection tab. But this is cards like Faithless Looting,
Yep, draw 2
Frantic
cards,
Search,
discard a card, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. Yep, same thing.
Merfolk Looter, taps, draw a card, discard a card.
Yep.
Thrill of Possibility, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards.
Oh yeah, pitch 2 to draw 2, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's rummaging.
Technically rummaging.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Same
If
kind of deal.
You
but, like,
end up with the same number of cards, right? You're getting rid of a number of cards and you're keeping a number of cards. Technically, if we're being very, very specific, these can be card disadvantage because Faithless Looting, for instance, you draw 2 and then discard 2, but you've also cast Faithless Looting.
So you actually are down a
You're
card.
down 1 card. However, it has flashback, so then it becomes card advantage. Very weird.
But then you've put 2 cards in your graveyard, which you might have access to.
Yeah,
So then it's
again,
card advantage.
Graveyard, it's similar to Surveil. If you have anything that cares about the graveyard, these become great. Really, really, really good. Again, I will say in favor of looting over surveilling and scrying, you can hit land drops with this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you find a land on the top with a surveil, you can't hit that land unless you draw a card. And
That's true.
Same with scry. But if you loot and you draw 2 cards and one of those is a land, you pitched a couple of other things, you've hit your land drop. So
Unless you're playing Crucible of Worlds.
oh,
Now we're going to... We've gotten to the semantics of it all now.
You can break anything.
But you can break anything. And I think that's the message of these kind of like half card draw slots. That if you can really synergize with them, even though it might not be giving you advantage in your hand, if it's going to your graveyard, then it could be giving you advantage.
Yeah, but you need to be chasing proper factual card draw for most of your slots. I mean, in the same vein, cards that double the number of cards that you draw. Teferi's Ageless Insight, Alhamrat's Archive, these kinds of things.
I think these aren't actually card draw spells.
You wouldn't even tag these as card draw selection, card advantage?
No, I would tag them as enhancers. I would probably
That's
only
fair.
run these in decks that want to draw a lot of cards. Like the strategy of the deck is either like your Azor deck, where it's wheeling a lot, has a Chasm Skulker and a Psychosis Crawler in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am a bit iffy on even mentioning these as card draw because on their own, are they drawing you a card? Or are they giving you any kind of advantage on their own?
Well, to be specific, both of these cards, Teferi's Ageless Insight and Alhamrat's Archive, they only double your draws after your draw step. So I see where you're getting at, which is that if you just have an empty board and no other card draw spells whatsoever, these never draw you a card, ever.
Nope.
You have to already have card draw for them to draw cards. I'm with you. I think they aren't really a card draw spell. They are a great enhancer. And in certain decks, if your commander draws cards really well, if your deck just cares about drawing cards, they become amazing, but they're not true card draw. In the same vein, I think I would also say the cards that draw lands out of your library.
Oh,
I've heard people call these card draw before, like Sylvan Scrying card draw, and I'm like, no.
That's, if anything, that's a tutor.
Yeah.
That's not a card draw. Even like a Cultivate, to me, is not card draw. It's tutoring a land.
And it's ramp.
And it's ramp.
Yeah.
And like, to me, drawing lands out of your deck, I'm using air quotes here, is not drawing cards because you're getting a very particular type of card, which is a land.
Yeah.
Sylvan Scrying, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, they're never going to draw you the board wipe that you desperately need.
No, it's true. It's much more akin to a tutor in a lot of ways. Like, even a card like, what's the land tax? The 1 mana enchantment in white.
Yeah.
In your upkeep, if someone has more lands than you shoot at 3 planes out of your deck. It's great for hitting your land drops.
I would consider that deck thinning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great for hitting land drops. Look, it's similar to the scrying thing again, right?
Yep.
Like, you can hit land drops with it. You can have some more control over your destiny with it, but you're never drawing a board wipe. You're never drawing your synergy pieces.
Let's move on. Let's straight up not tag these as land. Let's not tag these as card draw at all.
I'm with you. Similar vein, mill. Cards that put cards into your graveyard. Again, it's like Surveil. It's like looting. If you want cards in your bin, it's like card draw.
Yeah, like in my Scarab God deck, I have a lot of mill cards that I have tagged as card advantage and card selection because...
It's interesting as well that this is a deck you were very low on card draw in general.
Yeah, true. That was one of the ones that came up lower on tagged card draw. Yeah,
I think you might even... I think potentially there's a lot of cards in that deck that you haven't even tagged as card advantage selection because they're not really. They're just mill. I think you might have had a mill tag. I did this in my decks. Like, my Merrin deck, for instance, was another deck that was really low on card draw. It was like 8 pieces or something. There's like 20 ways to mill in that deck because mill, if you're reanimating stuff, is kind of like drawing cards. Kind of.
I think, look, okay, we talked about the definition of card draw at the very top of this episode. We're now getting a little bit loosey-goosey with the definition. And mill is like card draw in very specific strategies. Yeah. Like Reanimator.
It can give you access to more cards than you otherwise would have, which was our definition. But also, you can't hit land drops by milling.
So like Ultra Dementia, Stitches Supplier. Yeah. Even, a card that I actually think is pretty hot in this category, Fact or Fiction.
Oh,
this is a great
Fact or Fiction
card.
Is card draw.
Yeah, because that puts cards in your hands. Yeah. Kind of.
I would call Fact or Fiction card draw and mill. If I was tagging that in my deck, I would tag it as mill and card draw. And in fact, I think if you check my around me list right now, Fact or Fiction is tagged card draw and mill.
I'm curious if the listeners feel the same. Let us know. How do you? What would you tag Fact or Fiction in your Moxfield list?
I feel like it always puts cards in your hand, right?
But it always puts cards in your graveyard too, because your opponents are never just going to put it all in one pile.
I think it's both. Because does it ever not draw you cards? Like, it can't not be card draw, right?
No, I think I think I would have to at least give it the puts at least a card in your hand.
Yeah, and most of the time, if someone picks 2 piles and it's 4 in one and 1 in the other, it doesn't matter how good the one is. You take 4 cards for 3 mana, or 4 mana, I should say. I guess I'd give a very small honorable mention to those lands that draw cards.
I like War Room,
Bonder's Enclave. Again, when you're desperate, you love these cards so much, you're like, holy cow, I've missed my land drop. Whoa, I've got a war room. I can dig one deeper.
Yeah, like Castle Lochwain, another one. These cards. Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you're only in 2 color, like if you're in a Gruul deck and you're in just red-green, Bonder's Enclave, you're probably going to have a creature with power 3 or greater. You can draw a card off that. That's fine.
If you're in a colorless deck, these are great.
Yeah,
any sort of Eldrazi deck, it's like, cool, this is a waste with upside.
Yeah, waste with upside.
Look, drawing cards might not always feel fun, but if you want consistency in your decks, it is absolutely essential. Whether you're cantripping, impulsing, looting, or surveilling, you need to balance the bombs in your deck with the cards that find the bombs. So, Space Commanders, command received.
Whoa. I feel like we were powering through those categories at the end there. I hadn't really thought about all of those, like, kind of nuances to the advantage that some cards can get you and how you consider that card draw, because like we found from the start of this episode, card draw is super important, so we need to think about it properly. Is mill proper card draw in my deck?
I look, and weirdly, for every one of those categories where I could see both of us kind of like look a bit puzzled as to why this was there, I've had someone somewhere be like, this is like card draw because it does this, and I've had to be like, oh, is it?
I'm glad we have now said on record, Sylvan Scrying, not card draw.
Not card draw. You've heard it here first. Look, to you listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What are your favorite ways to draw cards in Commander?
Yeah, did we miss any cards that were your favorites?
Yeah.
You can tell us on all of our social platforms at Get Commanded everywhere, or you can tell us live while we're playing Commander on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/getcommanded.
Yeah.
And if you miss any of the live stuff, you can tell us in the comments section on YouTube.
Yeah. It'll end up there eventually.
When James has a minute.
Which is rare sometimes. Look, we'd be lost without our patrons over on Patreon. It's linked in the show notes. It's the absolute best way to support the Get Commanded podcast.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank our patrons, Stella Tam, Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, and Dia.
Yeah.
We'd also like to make a special shout out to Fletcher Cutting. And Wizard Down Under. For supporting us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You are the best. We're not making that a thing.
No, never again.
But also, once again, as we say every episode, thanks again to Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast. This is your place to go if you want a really nice deck box and really nice sleeves and a really nice binder that all match and in lovely yellow color or purple or pink.
The pink looks so good.
Walt's favorite is the pink. But you can go to palmsoffgaming.com.au/#GetCommanded and you can get 10% off all of their awesome products and support us at the same time. So palmsoffgaming.com.au/#GetCommanded. Yeah.
That's all the magic stuff. We'd better planeswalk out of here. Something outside of magic, outside of Commander. It's your turn. Where are we going?
I'm going to talk about my boyfriend again.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like I do all the time. But look, Theo, if you don't know Theo did all the wonderful artwork and brand design for the Get Commanded podcasts.
His Instagram is linked in the show notes. Yes.
You can go and check out Dustbin Raccoon on Instagram to check out all of his amazing work. But,
such cool stuff.
Look, Theo has made some incredible steps recently in their personal lives, and I just wanted to brag about how amazingly proud I am of them.
Yeah.
They have officially legally changed their name, which is a huge step.
Oh, this happened just the other day, didn't it?
Yeah. It's Theo Tepish. I'm not doxing them, but they're incredibly proud. Tepish, for those that don't know, is
Vlad the Impaler's real surname. Shocking me, who thought his surname was the Impaler. But yes, Vladimir
In other words,
Tepesh.
Dracula.
Yep.
The guy, the real life guy that Dracula was based off.
Yep, that's
is,
the surname that Theo chose for himself. And by the way, it fits perfectly.
Oh, I love it.
It is entirely their vibe.
yeah, and that's initials are now TT. That's cool.
So cool.
Yeah, I
Love
think it's
that for
great.
them.
And even more excitingly, and there might be more information coming out in regards to this on future episodes of the podcast, but Theo has got a consultation for top surgery, which is really exciting. So look, if I'm just putting it out there, if any of the listeners out there would like to support Theo and just say thanks to creating such amazing artwork for this podcast, do get in touch with us. I will be putting together some kind of fundraisery type thing to help raise funds for this surgery. But I'm incredibly proud of Theo and just where they're at right now. And freaking moved to tears, man.
Yeah,
they're doing such a great job.
Gender affirming care is a fucking beautiful thing for people to just live their lives the way they want to live them, and it will never stop making me happy that people are able to do that for themselves, and I'm fucking stoked for Theo.
Yeah, it's actually coming around way quicker than we thought. There's a new surgeon in Melbourne that's only just moved here, and they've basically got no patients. So usually,
wait
like
list.
an 8-month wait list can be like really painful, but at this point it could be a couple of months. So it's very
huge.
Full on all of a sudden. But if you want to support Theo in their journey, if you know Theo personally and want to help out, please reach out to me. Please reach out to Theo. We appreciate hearing from you.
We should definitely shout it out as well. Like
Yes,
we owe Theo basically everything cool you've ever seen of Get Commanded.
All our custom emojis in the Discord.
Yep, literally the album art when you're looking at this on your phone.
Yep.
The
inspiration for the music that we've got in our show comes from the artwork that Theo created.
Yep, like they've inspired us so much with even like the Rule Zero template thing. Like we obviously put the words of that together. They designed entirely everything you visually see on that beautiful, beautiful poster, if any of you have seen it before.
All of our promotional flyers.
They're going to be making a bunch more stuff for us, and literally like the visual language that everything we make speaks, that's just Theo. Like Theo is responsible for every ounce of that.
It's so cool that my partner is just a part of this journey along with us. It's really, really amazing.
It's really amazing. And definitely when we put together that fundraiser thing, we're 100% talking about it on here.
Yeah,
we got
just putting it out there early. Nothing's confirmed yet, but
of course.
Hit us up.
We love Theo.
We do love Theo. I love Theo a lot.
Yeah, a bit more than me.
A little bit.
I don't know what I mean. That's all we have time for. We'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Goodbye, Commander players.